as open in DC, as I understand, as they are here in the beautiful state of Colorado. So we will be doing this virtually this year in the hopes that we can get back out to DC in person very soon. So again, thank you all for joining us. Before we get started with today, I do want to just take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. So again, you'll see this super cute theme throughout the PowerPoint that guides us throughout the next 2 days. That's thanks to Brittany. Our title sponsor for our virtual Washington, D.C. fly-in is brought to you by Chevron. And Chevron has just really stepped up to the plate throughout this pandemic to continue to support Club 20 and all of the good work that we do as a bipartisan organization. So I just want to take a moment and thank Chevron for their continued support of our mission and goals. Next, I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of our sponsors for this virtual Washington, D.C. fly-in. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to keep the lights on and continue to do the good work we do. So again, our title sponsor is Chevron, Carrie Baird and the team. We certainly appreciate your continued support. Our general sponsors, who are just so overwhelming with their generosity, are Mark and Kathy Feckler from the Durango area. Mark and Kathy, thank you for your continued support as well. And for those of you who received a digital briefing book by email, which should have been all of our participants, that was sponsored by Executive Security International and Rocky Mountain Health Plans. So we certainly hope that you enjoyed that digital briefing book. It was a different and cool format where we actually had a flip book format for you. So we certainly hope that you enjoyed that and you found it informative as you prepared for this meeting today. So before we introduce our first presenter, we still have about 8 minutes before our first presenter is up to present. I do want to hand it over to Club 20's board chair, Merritt Linke, just to give a few opening remarks. Merritt?
Okay, thank you, Kristen. And first of all, thank you all for being on the call, all the members. And this is a great opportunity to hear our voices heard in DC. And especially thanks to Christian for putting together a fantastic agenda and your leadership and getting all that done. Thanks to Brittany and Julia for keeping the plane flying or the ship floating and all the nuts and bolts work that they do in the background. That's fantastic. And I don't know that we always get that recognition that they deserve for keeping these things going. Thank you all the staff and the DC personnel that's joining us and listening to our comments. So as Christian said, I am Merritt Linke. I'm a Grand County Commissioner, and for those of you that don't know, Grand County is the headwaters of the Colorado River, and it's literally over the mountains from Denver, Boulder, Front Range. So that's where we are. Our water normally flows west, but we are literally over the mountain from Denver, Boulder, headwaters of the Colorado. Thank you all, and Christian, back to you.
Thanks, Merritt. And as we wait for our first presenter to jump on, I do want to go over the agenda briefly, just so everybody has an understanding of what the layout is going to be. So instead of doing 2 full days of meetings, which would be exhausting by Zoom, we've all had Zoom. What do you call it, Merritt?
Zoom fatigue.
Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
I think we've all had Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
And techno stress, I think.
Techno stress. That's my other one. Yeah.
Right.
Zoom fatigue and techno stress.
We don't want that. So we've broken this up into 2 chunks, about 4 or 5 hours today and about 4 hours tomorrow, so that we still have the opportunity to hear some incredible updates from leaders at the federal level and even a couple from the state level. But also we have peppered in a few virtual networking opportunities. And so the way that we're going to do that later on this afternoon is when we have those networking breaks, everybody's going to be randomly assigned to a breakout room. And we're going to put you in a breakout room of about 5 or so people. And you guys can network and just visit with one another and catch up. And then when we're ready to bring you back into the main room, we'll pull you out of that breakout room and put you back into the main room for the next speaker. And then at the end of today's format, we do have an hour-long virtual networking reception. So before we jump into that networking reception, please feel free to excuse yourself and grab a libation and some snacks. You're your flight peanuts and those delicious little cookies, those Biscoff cookies that the flight attendants give you. Grab a drink, grab some snacks, and jump into that virtual networking reception. It looks like our first speaker has joined us, and we were slightly ahead of schedule, so nobody's late to this meeting. I'm so excited to introduce to you our first presenter. I actually reached out to our Colorado Department of Transportation Director, Shoshana Liu, and said we would love to hear, an update from our federal partners at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Can you help connect us there? Because we do know she has some history with the department, and she was super generous in connecting us with our first presenter, Charles Small with the U.S. Department of Transportation. He's here to kick things off this afternoon. Charles is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs for the U.S. Department of Transportation, and he's here to give us a quick update and take some questions. So, Charles, we will stop our screen share and hand it off to you to take it away.
Well, thanks so much, Christian. It's really good to be with you, everyone here today, via the power of broadband and Microsoft Teams. We use Microsoft Teams in the Department of Transportation. We're using Zoom right now. Sorry, when you switch platforms, sometimes you lose a little bit in translation. But it's really great to be speaking to a group from one of our great states out west. I had the pleasure of visiting Denver 2 years ago. I guess, 2.5 years ago now, I guess. And I have some really good friends from college out there, as well as from other walks of life, and hopefully we'll be able to visit with all of you out in the state of Colorado soon, or hopefully here in the nation's capital city in Washington, D.C. It has been a very interesting 17 weeks of the Biden administration, and especially over these last 2 months since the president launched the American Jobs Plan in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we really began this infrastructure year in earnest. And just to say this, I think one of the key things that the key questions that we're trying to answer here is what are we buying? What are we trying to do when we say we're trying to make a one-time major generational, once in a century investment in our nation's infrastructure? And I think when you look at the history of the United States, there have been pieces of infrastructure that have really enabled our country to progress. I think it first started with the Erie Canal, which really opened up the seaways and waterways of this country to commerce, and then it continued with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, which a lot of people don't realize was I know it has an unfortunate history in some places, but was vital in connecting the country from east to west for the very first time, and also in terms of doing a big infrastructure project after we literally just had the Civil War. And then kind of moving on as you get into the 20th century, we have the Eisenhower interstate system, which we are blessed to ride on today, and the American Jobs Plan will be making a huge, robust investment in that interstate highway system, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that in a minute. But another thing that we also did during the 20th century that I feel like a lot of people always skip over because the interstate highway system was so great, but after that, in the 60s and 70s, is really when we developed our airport system, which we haven't really used over the last year because of the pandemic. But the numbers that we're seeing from TSA, it's going to be a gangbuster summer in terms of flying and going home to see loved ones and friends and family that we haven't seen due to this crisis. So that's what we did in the 20th century. And so now we're in the 21st century, and we're trying to define what infrastructure means and what is going to be that great big investment that this country needs for us to continue to be a leader on the world stage. And what I would submit to you today is that the president's plan, the American Jobs Plan, is that answer. Just within the Department of Transportation alone, we are proposing $621 billion worth of investment over the baseline that's established by the current federal FAST Act, which is the current law of the land when it comes to at least the surface part of transportation infrastructure. So we're really talking about a huge investment here. Hopefully, if this is passed by Congress, in the American Jobs Plan, initially we proposed about $157 billion worth of investment in our roads, highways, and bridges. In our latest offer to the Senate Republicans, which we tabled last Friday, it's a negotiation, and we're trying to get to the middle. We propose about $120 billion in those core assets, and which I know are really critical, particularly to Western Colorado, when you're talking about a highway investment and bridge investment. And just to kind of double down on this bridge investment piece, I know in a lot of especially rural communities, smaller bridges that tend to be off-system bridges and less than 20 feet long are actually really critical bridges. They're really critical for the farmer or rancher that needs that critical access to get to the highway to deliver their goods for import or export. And our intention is to address at least 10,000 of these smaller bridges throughout the country through the American Jobs Plan. Another thing that I do want to highlight that I know is really important is the $5 billion that we've set aside in terms of a rural development fund to really invest in those rural communities that are just the backbone and lifeblood of this country. I noticed that in one of your resolutions, you guys have endorsed supporting some some local revenue measures in transportation. And I just do want to, and I'm digressing a little bit here, but I just do want to say, as someone who's a former local official, and obviously we have a local official at the very top of the department, we totally understand the pressures that you guys are in to make investments to stay competitive, especially economically, in your transportation system. And I just want you guys to know we are certainly aware of what's going on in the Colorado legislature right now. I'm happy. I probably can't and shouldn't weigh in on those particular goings on. I do want to know that it is my hope and our hope that the American Jobs Plan, should the legislature get to yes on something, that what the investments we are making combined with what's going on there can be a real win for all of Colorado, whether you're in the west or east or live around Denver or up on the Front Range. So we're definitely aware of what's going on a bit locally. Another key area that I do want to point out is on broadband, which obviously we are using today to be able to meet. The initial proposal from the president was $100 billion for broadband, which would go to states and localities all across the country. And in our latest offer on Friday, we actually lowered that to $65 billion to meet the proposal that was put forward by the Senate Republicans. And I highlight this because I know that the media and journalists love to get into the horse race of politics, but there are actually some areas of agreement, of bipartisan agreement already in this negotiation. Broadband is going to be one of them. We're already at a similar funding level on that piece. Another place is on airports, where our proposal to put in about $25 billion into airports is very close to the $27 billion that the Senate Republicans have proposed. Another place where there is a bipartisan agreement on funding levels is on waterways and ports. We're both actually around $17 billion with what we're proposing. I'll also additionally point out on the Senate floor, and hopefully will be completed, hopefully by Friday, though this may bleed in a little bit to Saturday, is the Endless Frontiers Act, which is the competitiveness bill that would boost the National Science Foundation, as well as semiconductor manufacturing in this country with a $50 billion investment. And that is also another area where we're starting to see a lot of bipartisan agreement. And I really just stress this because our commitment to bipartisanship in this process is real, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to work with all of our partners in Congress to get to yes on a deal that can deliver for the American people. So another thing that I also do want to highlight from the American Jobs Plan that I think is going to be really beneficial for Western Colorado is the investments that we are going to be making in rail. The president in the American Jobs Plan, and he's Amtrak Joe, and he's probably followed by Amtrak Pete, who's probably the number 2 cheerleader for rail here in the Biden-Harris administration. But we are proposing $80 billion of investment in our rail in our rail infrastructure across the country. A lot of that will go to operations and maintenance. Of course, we've got to fix what we have first, but also too, it will go to rail grade crossings, which I know are critical in a lot of in a lot of rural places, especially on the safety front that we want to do. Also in terms of making investments in our freight rail infrastructure and obviously our passenger rail infrastructure to make sure that we're connecting different places throughout Colorado and throughout the country. So in sum, and I'm happy to take any questions about this. I think the American Jobs Plan obviously is going to be a huge benefit to Western Colorado and to the country if Congress should pass it. I will note that these negotiations are literally changing by the hour here in Washington. I think just yesterday we had the news that the main Senate Republican group will be offering their updated proposal on Thursday. And then we also discovered that Senator Manchin and Senator Romney are now working on a potential proposal should maybe these current negotiations fail. And of course, today, just this morning, we had the Senate EPW committee pass a bipartisan bill out of committee that could be taken up on the Senate floor that would reauthorize at least the roads, highways, and bridge portion of the surface transportation reauthorization bill. So a lot of exciting things happening on infrastructure, and I'd be glad to take your questions right now.
Thank you so much, Charles. And I'm not sure, you obviously went on our website, which was very kind and generous of you to spend some time. I can tell that you're a busy man. Your stuff's blowing up left and right. I can hear the little ding.
Sorry about that.
No, I know how busy you must be. Yeah. So thank you for that. Club 20 was actually founded in 1953 for the purpose of transportation. At that time, only 10% of our roads on the western slope were paved. And as is the case with the rural-urban challenges, all the money was going to Denver to pave Denver roads, and we weren't getting any on this side of the state. And so the transportation issue, just even having basic rural road pavement has been so critical for 60 years. And as I'm sure you're probably aware, Colorado, I think, came in 6th in the country for the worst rural road pavement condition, which our CDOT director, Shoshana Liu, it has been very quick to respond to and to divert investment into rural road conditions. So it's been a key issue for us for literally 6 decades. And not to be pessimistic, but I don't anticipate a large funding package at the state or federal level to come and solve all those problems in the immediate future. So it'll be something we continue to chip away at. If the president's infrastructure package is approved by Congress, do you know how those funds will be allocated to the states? Will they be in like a block of, block grant type of mechanism, or what will that look like?
Well, the real answer is that it's going to be a mix. Of course, we've heard plenty from state governments about the need to keep the sort of status quo in the formulas. So and that is actually what the Senate EPW committee did in their markup today. So you will definitely see formula funding that you are familiar with continue in the American Jobs Plan, but also you will see an expansion, hopefully, on discretionary grant programs. We are proposing, and on Friday we'll actually be able to share with you some of these exact numbers that as we are releasing the budget on Friday, a nice little Memorial Day present for all you budget nerds. But we will be proposing to raise the infra grant discretionary pot, as well as the now raise rebuilding American infrastructure with sustainability and equity, that pot of funding as well. We're also very interested in funding for EV charging stations around the country that would support, obviously, personal vehicles as well as medium duty and heavy duty vehicles as well. The president's committed to putting 500,000 EV charging stations around the road, and we're proposing $15 billion for it. I'll note that the Senate EPW bill had about $2.5 billion in that bipartisan agreement. So it will be a mix of grants and discretionary dollars as well as formula dollars. But I think that the key thing to really remember here is that it's going to be a lot of money. And while I know it's not going to solve all of our problems in one fell swoop, it will provide the building blocks for us to get at those big problems, especially when it comes to highway safety, which I know is a huge concern. 38,000 deaths a year is just unacceptable, and it should be unacceptable to any American who rides along our interstate or local road systems.
Absolutely. And should the transportation funding package at the state level be passed, Senate Bill 260, that certainly will add to the available pot of resources and create a line. I'm not sure if you know this, Colorado Department of Transportation does not have a line item in our general fund.
I did not know that.
It's insane. It's insane. So we continue to work for a long-term sustainable funding source for our Colorado Department of Transportation. I do want to hand it over to Ray Beck for a question of Mr. Small. Ray, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
And please, Charles. Charles.
Charles. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. And it's nice to have you with us today, Charles. Appreciate the presentation. And I'm particularly interested in, and Christian really did a good job of laying out our concerns with our roads here in Western Colorado. And it's been a continual fight. And should Bill 260 here at the state level pass, we have a lot of questions about that, stuff that's included in it that we're not real comfortable with. We haven't taken a position on the particular bill other than monitor for right now. But I was interested in the airports and the rail that this bill is proposing. Should this bill pass, in terms of airports, will that go to the FAA and then they will administer it, or is that coming straight from the federal government to the states? So that, as an example, I sat on the Colorado Aeronautical Board, the Division of Aeronautics, for 6 years, and so I understand the process and how important our airports are to our local communities and what they contribute from a financial standpoint. So I was just wondering how that might be distributed, and then maybe go into a little bit more depth on the rail, if you would, please. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely, Ray. And look, I think right now we are still at the framework stage of all of this. So, you know, I can't tell you with any certainty exactly how airport funds will be distributed. But my guess would probably be that and in the president's proposal that we would put a lot of money into the airport improvement program, and then that would be distributed you know, through the states and to and I think in some cases directly to airports to support their airport needs. You know, certainly, and you know, I know this has definitely come up. You know, the concept of user fees, especially at airports, which the passenger facility charge is a critical user fee to support airports. To be clear, you know, we have not taken a position on raising the passenger facility charge, but you know, I know that if it were to be raised, you know, a lot of the bigger airports would probably move out of the AIP program, which would then free up even additional funds under AIP for smaller or medium-sized airports. So that's the likely funding mechanism and sort of the dynamics I think at play there. But you know, we will have that policy fight when we're ready to have that policy fight. Hopefully later sometime next month. I think on the rail piece, and I think what's probably really important for Club 20 is really that there's going to be a significant amount of funding to really connect places that aren't currently connected by rail. And you know, we certainly have heard a lot in particular about the Front Range rail project, and that's something that the governor has spoken directly to the secretary about. And you know, I would certainly be interested in, and you know, maybe you know this particular venue isn't the place for it, but would definitely love to know what kind of what your rail priorities are, and you know, we could definitely, and you know, I'm happy to pull in our Federal Railroad Administration to do sort of a deeper dive on like how we can meet your needs should the American Jobs Plan pass.
And I'll speak to that. Since you have friends in the Denver area, I imagine you've driven the I-25 corridor, yes. Which is a nightmare. And because of the urbanization right up to that corridor, there's literally no room for expansion. So really a rail route north to south along I-25, I think makes a lot of sense. Though, you know, we don't live in Denver, we do travel over to Denver, all of us regularly, and I think that could help alleviate some of the congestion that we do see along I-25. And I've heard recently, as far as regional rail demands are concerned, maybe the increased utilization of rail for the transportation of some of our goods that are manufactured throughout the region, as opposed to trucking them over Vail Pass and over to Denver. There's a little metric that every time Vail Pass gets closed, usually by a semi-truck accident, we lose $1 million in revenue per hour that the pass is closed. So there are huge economic impacts whenever that pass does get closed. And like I said, typically, well, two things. It's caused by out-of-staters not knowing how to drive on the snow, which is its own can of worms. But it's also, you know, that a lot of those collisions are involve truckers. So, you know, if we can utilize other routes or mechanisms to take some of that congestion off the roads, it may help. But we can explore rail priorities in a later setting, and maybe shoot some of those over to you if we do have some that populate to the top of the list there.
Absolutely, would love to have that conversation. And duly noted, Christian, I will not drive while in Colorado. I will only have Coloradans drive me around.
Just let your friends drive you. That way you can hang out in the passenger seat and look at the beautiful landscapes. Merritt Linky, Board Chair of Club 20. Go ahead, and then we'll go to Nancy.
Thank you, Charles, for being on the call. And I really appreciated hearing you talk about the rural roads and bridges, and specifically mentioning farms and ranches. And I think that's critical, and it's often overlooked. And if I know my history correct, and I think I do on this one, Harry Truman, before he became president, was one of the first people to really put tax dollars into county road systems, and that was specifically for the purpose of getting farm products to town. And I think that often gets overlooked, like I said, because of the fact that only 1 or 2% of the people in the country are really directly involved with ag. So it's not a lot of voices. So I was really happy to hear you say that, because I think that makes me feel good that you get it, and how important that is to get our products that we raise to town, to the markets, to the people, to get it on the table. So how can you, going forward, make sure that we can take care of those small rural roads and those bridges when we hear these loud voices about the I-70s of the world and all these populations that need to get from A to B? How can we take care of these rural roads? And how can we make sure that we get funding to do that when those voices aren't so strong? That's my question. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think it is our intention with the American Jobs Plan to get funding directly to county and local governments. I think you saw a little bit of this sort of new policy platform in the American Rescue Plan, which delivered state and local aid to county and city level governments. And within the American Jobs Plan, and you'll learn a little bit more about this on Friday, you will see places where we are delivering we are proposing funding that would go directly to counties, both rural and urban, of course, and will give you some flexible means to sort of localize your dollars in a more efficient way. And so, for us too, the value and priority of equity is really critical. And certainly, while that means racial equity in some circumstances, it also means economic equity. And what we are trying to do with the American Jobs Plan is really ensure that we're striking a balance between the rural and urban parts of our country, so that they're both supported to participate in whatever this new post-pandemic economy is going to look like. I'll note this already, and I'm coming to you live and direct from my basement here in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside the DC border. But what we're starting to see is that while there is rush hour in the evening, as folks are starting to return to work and school is starting to end, there really isn't rush hour in the morning. And as we start to understand what those patterns are and how they're playing out in rural America as well as urban America, we're going to need flexible funding to kind of address those new issues as they spring up, which is why I'm very excited to share with you on Friday our plans in terms of direct funding for county roads, and which would obviously supplement what you get from the state.
Thanks, Charles. And I'll make sure we get signed up for your newsletter so that we can blast that information out to our folks once it's live and ready for the general public. We'll turn it over to Nancy Fishering for our last question for Charles.
Hi, thank you very much for spending the time. Christian said that so well. We know you're busy. I get very concerned about this new call for earmarks and wanting to make sure Colorado doesn't keep it a good place, because earmarks tend to be very political, in my opinion. But the other piece I'd like to bring up is a little bit teeing off of what Merritt said about ag roads. We're spending $40 million on Highway 50, which is our other main east-west corridor through the state of Colorado. And because they only can come up with $40 million, we are forced into really draconian management to try to make that work. And a lot of our farm work and products from Western Colorado goes through Highway 50 because it goes down to Texas. And we seem to not care that Colorado has a much more costly problem when we put in a new highway, because our only other options were bridges and going over versus going through narrow corridors. And it was an impossible decision. Everybody's going to be inconvenienced for what, 2 years? And there's really unique problems when you're trying to get over the Rocky Mountains in the middle of the country, the way Colorado is. So I just like to bring that up because $40 million is nothing. It's an interchange in a downtown area. But for us, they can't even come up with the money for a bridge and give us the best route. It's not what we're doing today for 40 million is not going to take care of the projected population by the year 2040, 2050 for sure. So we're doing inefficient money right now. And so just keeping that in mind as earmarks come flying in, we're not asking for bridges to nowhere. We're talking about a bridge just to get us out of little valleys and narrow canyons that you can't get out of in Colorado. And we haven't spent money like that to get across the state. Now, I'm downtown Denver, some of those places are expensive, I understand that. But like the Vail Pass or getting through the corridors around Glenwood Canyon, we spent a fortune. But that's one road, and it was closed last year for 2 weeks, our major I-70 corridor, because of fires and the floods that we might see this year. And then our other option is Highway 50. It's going to be closed 19 hours a day, kind of, certain days of the week. It's really not good answers. So just a little whining.
Oh, no, I hear you. And I think that's
everywhere.
appropriate. And, I think it's stories like this that really motivated the president from when he was on the campaign trail to commit to proposing this much funding. I mean, look, just when you look at our roads, bridges, highways, and transit alone, I mean, we're talking about $1 trillion in the backlog. And so, while AJP will lay the groundwork to be able to address that totally, down the road, the funding is a real issue, and that is why we're putting such big numbers out there to try to address issues like the one you just raised, Nancy, with Highway 50, and certainly too, our proposal to fix it first, to really encourage state governments and county governments and local governments to really do that basic maintenance from a safety perspective, and to keep the roads good, which can help on the congestion side as well, so you don't have situations where you have to close down a highway for 19 months and inconvenience an entire regional populace. And I just wanted to really just address the earmark question. That is up to Congress. It is called congressionally directed spending now. They have asked us for very little technical advice on their earmark process. So we'll see how that ends up at the end of the year, most likely. But look, whatever Congress decides, how much money they decide to give us, or where they tell us to spend it, we will honor our fiduciary responsibility and spend it in the way they ask us to. We'll see if hopefully earmarks, maybe they'll be able to help the process a little bit, and hopefully help us get to yes on an infrastructure package as Chairman DeFazio and other folks in the House have intended. But I'll just close with this if I can, Christian. I think really these next couple of weeks are going to be very, very, very critical. And I mean by next week, next week, the week after, these next 3 weeks, I think will really determine whether we end up with a bipartisan package, or if we have to go through a more partisan package through the reconciliation process. So what I would just encourage groups like Club 20 and encourage you, Christian, and everyone else here is, now is really the time to stand and be counted, and make your your priorities known to folks in Congress, to folks like you're doing now, like to me in the administration. But you know, also feel free to engage, you know, through your local platforms, your newspapers, your blogs, and to let folks know, to let policymakers know in DC that these are the priorities of Western Colorado. These are the things you like about the American Jobs Plan. These are the things you may want to fix. But really, these next 3 weeks are really critical, which is why I'm really glad to be talking to all of you today. And always, of course, as I know this is the beginning of a relationship, but I hope to definitely see you guys in person soon, because there is no substitute for in-person diplomacy.
Well, that's the truth. Charles, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and going into evening in your neck of the woods. We sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. A pleasure to be with you all today, and hopefully we'll see you in the capital city very soon.
We hope so. Our next presenter is somebody who is extremely familiar with Club 20. Greg Walcher is a fifth-generation native of Western Colorado and is currently the president of the Natural Resources Group, a consulting firm specializing in energy, water, public lands, forestry, wildlife, and other environmental issues. We have asked Greg to help us better understand how to elevate the rural voice and make sure that our issues are not lost in the chaos of the political environment today. Greg, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Christian. I appreciate being invited. I always appreciate being invited anywhere, actually, and I'm hoping that everybody can hear me okay. I can't see everybody, though. I see a bunch of black boxes for people that don't have their cameras turned on. But Nancy, thanks for turning yours back on. And Ray and Merritt, I can see both of you, but I see several other longtime friends' names on there. So hello to Tom and Kathy and Cindy and Chris and Robbie and others I've known a long time. And how great to have Club 20. I know this Washington trip has always been kind of an every other year thing, but still it's great to have Club 20 still kicking. And I might say, I hope you're kicking all the right people in all the right places. I haven't actually spoken to any sort of official Club 20 group for 7 or 8 years now, but I don't know, I haven't changed very much. Have you? I might say I used to be indecisive. Now I'm not sure.
Greg, it's still the same cast of characters with a few firecrackers like Mandy Miller and Betsy Baird sprinkled in there. So
yes, yes. Hi, Mandy.
Still all people you know.
All right. Well, I'm glad to be invited. Mostly I spend my time, as some of you know, in Washington, D.C. these days, which is you used to call it Disneyland on the Potomac, but that isn't very nice and friendly to Disneyland anymore. I think it's fair to say that the world of Washington is nuttier and crazier than it's ever been in our lifetimes. It's been the case for more than a decade under at least 3 administrations now, that it just seems like it gets nuttier and nuttier all the time. And it has convinced me actually to start spending more of my time on things less directly connected to the government, because I've gotten, I guess, increasingly where I don't see the government as the answer to all of the problems anymore. And so many of the things that we deal with in rural issues and in Western Colorado, the government is actually a hindrance to what needs to be done. So I've gotten more involved over the years in hands-on, I guess in free market conservation efforts, you might say. And for me, that means hands-on environmentalism. And the definition of that for me has always been fairly simple, and that is that recovering endangered fish requires hatcheries, not government regulations. And restoring healthy forests requires chainsaws and not committees. And creating energy independence requires drill rigs and not new deals, green or any other color. The reclamation of lands used for various purposes requires nurseries and not super funds. And conserving Colorado's water requires reservoirs and not more long-term water plans. I'm looking for solutions that are actual on the ground activities. And the truth of it is that all of that means private investment and not government spending. All of that can be done without the help of federal agencies or environmental industry groups. Now, that's a really difficult concept for people in government to grasp because it's dominated by such a sort of divisive and bitter partisan structure, at the moment dominated by Democrats whose theory is never let a good crisis go to waste, and by Republicans whose philosophy is never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Now, seems like we have sort of a whole new, with a new kind of administration, a whole new series of threats to rural America that groups like Club 20 ought to be and are concerned about. Some of it is stuff that we've seen before, and so it's not like it's a great mystery what the issues are or what we have to deal with, because we've seen these movies before. But we can't get tired of the battle. We can't get weary of the same struggle on the same issues year after year after year after year. That's sort of the strategy of the other side, I guess, to wear us down over a long period of time. But so once again, here we are dealing with the fallout from the Paris Climate Accord, which details are maybe less significant, but the reality is that it seeks to impose on the United States standards that are unattainable with current technology, and that doesn't do anything but help China and India. It doesn't do anything about the climate, but there it is anyway, and we're going to have to deal with it. We're dealing again with the new versions of the Clean Power Plan, which is, I guess, put simply, government's plan to kill the coal industry once and for all. That was just a handful of years ago. That was 2,000 jobs in Western Colorado. Obviously, it's fewer than that now, but the few that are left will be gone if these folks get their way. It means more dead and dying national forests and more catastrophic forest fires, with absolutely no industry partners left for the Forest Service to work with, even if they wanted to, and yet there is still no political will in the Forest Service to do anything about the problem. We're looking at a return of the BLM's methane rule and other anti-energy regulations we've dealt with before. We're going to deal once again with the waters of the United States, the WOTUS rule that seeks to assert federal control over every stream and creek and stock watering pond and parking lot gutter in the United States. They may not get it done quite that extreme, but there shouldn't be any doubt in anybody's mind what the goal is, which is to federalize control of water. We're going to be looking at new national monuments that you didn't ask for. It's sort of like there's a crowd of people who woke up from this really bad dream, and so they're saying, "Oh, okay, now where was I?" And so we're sort of right back where we were. And I want to stress, because I know there's a potential of offending people with comments like these, but I want to stress it is not because necessarily of partisanship. It isn't necessarily that these people love someone else and hate people who live in rural areas. It's not that at all. It's a lack of ownership of rural concerns that people in government, especially elected officials, used to care a lot about, and have evolved to the point where they sort of don't have to anymore. So there's a lot more talk about the ownership society and how much more people care about things that affect them more personally. George Will used to have a great way of describing the ownership society, and we look at it as why people in the West care so much more about the public lands than the people who don't live with those public lands in their backyard. George Will's explanation was simple in defining what he called the ownership society. The definition is no one washes a rental car. And he was talking about individuals, but I think the same thing is true of nations and states and governments. If you don't actually have to deal with something because it isn't in your backyard and your economy doesn't depend on it, your job doesn't depend on it, then you just flat don't care about it as much. And that's human nature. So I I don't think it's so much a partisan criticism. It's just saying we've evolved to a point where all sorts of people who dominate government now don't have any personal reason to care about what happens in what they view as isolated rural communities. I always remember that the first of the Club 20 Washington trips that I put together, which would have been in 1991, we met with we were supposed to meet with a senator from Rhode Island who was chairman of one of the powerful committees that in that case, the Environment and Public Works Committee, that had a lot to do with legislation we cared about at the time. And at the last minute, he canceled and sent his chief of staff to meet with us. And I'll never forget the meeting with this Rhode Island staffer who listened to everything we had to say and essentially said, "I don't care, we're doing this wilderness thing anyway." We weren't opposed to wilderness, by the way. We had a whole series of areas that we supported and some changes that we wanted made, and he just flat didn't care. And so we had various people in the room. There were 120 of us there at the time, and they were saying, "Well, let us tell you about the dependence of the economy on X, Y, and Z." And he listened to that, and it didn't seem to work. And so then somebody else said some different version of why he ought to listen to us more, and he still didn't care. And finally, somebody said to him, "Have you ever even been there?" And I'll never forget, as long as I live, him saying to us, there's a couple on this call even, I think, who were there and remember, he said to us, "You know, I got a lot of things to think about and worry about other than what you people think who live there." And I'll never forget that as long as I live, because it's a good illustration of what happens when people are so removed from decisions they're supposed to make that affect people. And it's a good reason to keep in mind why decisions are always made better by the people who live there than by the people who don't. We had, on a similar trip, we had a meeting at the White House once with the chairman of the Council on Environmental Quality, the White House CEQ. And what we encountered from her was actually not just disagreement with our issues, but she started out kind of saying to us, "It's not, okay, so I've never been to, I think it was area in Uray County we were talking about at the time." She says, "I've never been there, but for me, it's enough just to know that it's there." And for us, of course, it isn't enough just to know it's there. We have people there whose living depends on the access to and use of those public lands. But what we encountered from her wasn't just disagreement with our issues. It wasn't even just that she didn't particularly care about the people who live there. It was absolute contempt for the people who live there. And it sort of reminds me of this, because that hasn't gone away, and it isn't particularly unique anymore. But it sort of reminds me of what we went through with the ballot initiative this last year to reintroduce wolves, where you have an initiative overwhelmingly passed by voters who live in Denver and Boulder to reintroduce wolves, not in their counties, but in yours, in somebody else's backyard, even though they were well aware that the people who live there didn't want it. And the people who live in the counties where it's going to happen voted overwhelmingly against it. And the folks on the Front Range just flat didn't care. For me, when somebody puts an initiative on the ballot to do something to you in your community that you're opposed to, I don't care what it is, it doesn't matter. People can, reasonable people can differ in opinion on wolves or whatever the details might be. But when they do that in such a callous way that just flatly ignores the views of the people who live there, it displays, in my mind, contempt for the views of people in rural America. So now we've evolved to the point in, I guess, in talking about Club 20, because I had a very specific question from Christian to answer here, and there's no easy answer for it, but it's a thing that Club 20 has struggled with since 1953, which is how can rural communities that are not the source of most of the population in the state, how can they leverage their influence in some of the issues that we most care about? Then we've evolved sort of to a point where not only national leaders, but even state leaders don't even want to meet with you a lot of times, won't show up at your annual conferences or at the debates they get invited to. And so then your own people start wondering whether all of this matters, and we wind up with even a virtual Washington trip with, 25 people where we should have 125 or 225 or 1,000 or something. Even in a virtual world where people didn't have to buy plane tickets and hotels, it's hard to get people to commit to it. And you wind up meeting with, the deputy director of a bureau and 3 or 4 sort of sub-level Schedule 3 appointees and so on, but not with the Secretary of the Interior or the Secretary of Agriculture or the administrator of the EPA or the chairman of the CEQ or the chief of the Forest Service or the Speaker of the House. There aren't a bunch of senators coming to talk with you. I take it for granted that those people are invited, and as is their habit of the last few years, start immediately saying that they're too busy and figuring out who else they can send. It is not because they are particularly different than their predecessors who used to meet with us. And it is not because they love the other side so much and hate you. It's simpler than that. And I can't say this any plainer. Politicians and their appointees respect you enough to come to your meetings and have conversations with you when they think you might be able to hurt them. They have to think that there is some price to pay for crossing the people who live in the rural areas, and frankly, that there's a price to pay for crossing a group like Club 20. This is not a criticism of any of you, by the way. Christian and I have talked about this at length before, so she understands the spirit of this. But the direct question was, how do you gain rural influence and leverage rural influence in a world like this? And it sort of reminds me of the good witch from the north telling Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, "You've had the power to go home all along." And I just sort of want to say to Club 20, you have always had the resources that you need to leverage rural influence. It requires that people stick together and that they speak with one voice. And beyond that, it requires that you're willing to be controversial, that you're willing to criticize public officials in very public ways. And obviously it requires that you show up. Now, on that last point, obviously I'd be preaching to the choir here because I'm talking to all the people who did. But we need to figure out ways to get Club 20 back on the cutting edge, because political capital, as Ronald Reagan used to say, political capital is worthless until you spend it. Club 20 has one thing that will always be the case and always has been since Preston Walker rounded up a few newspaper editors in 1953 to start the whole thing. It has always been an organization that's basically 500 miles wide and 1 inch deep. There's no real power there. There never has been, and there never will be. And we just think about the raw numbers. As long as we live in a democratic republic, how can 10 people have influence over thousands? How can 500,000 people on the Western Slope dictate policy to 5 million who live on the Front Range? The reality is you only have the influence that you claim you have. You only have the power that you claim and that others perceive. And that includes, when you're talking about politicians, it includes the power to make them look bad. And you have to be willing to play that card sometimes. Doesn't mean that you play it all the time. Nobody wants to go through life being a jerk. But it's a card you have. It's your ace in the hole, and always has been and always will be. I think about the incident that we had when they started building the Denver International Airport. And we had operated for several years with an absolute promise from the governor and the mayor and others in the state's leadership that Western Slope tax dollars would not be used to build that airport. We didn't have any particular, sort of united front Western Slope reason to oppose Denver building a new airport. We sort of thought it was none of our business as long as it didn't jeopardize the connecting flights that we depended on. But a lot of people in the Western Slope cared about the use of their tax dollars to build an airport for some city that they don't fly in and out of. And so we had an absolute promise about it. And when it finally came right down to brass tacks, the state decided it had to kick in a bunch of money to make the final deal happen. So at that almost exact same time, and Christian, you'll relate to this, we had our annual meeting coming up, and we had invited Governor Romer to come and be the keynote speaker, and he had declined. And we had invited Mayor Pena to come, and he had declined. And so we held a press conference and put out a bunch of really loudmouth kind of nasty press releases saying that the governor had broken his promise to Western Colorado and that the mayor of Denver, unlike all his predecessors, clearly no longer cares about the people of rural Colorado. So the result of that was, because when you say something angry like that, it makes the front page virtually always, because the news media loves controversy. They love a good fight. And if they think somebody's going to say something bad about somebody, they always show up to a press conference. So they did. They put it all over the front pages, not just in the Daily Sentinel and the Montrose Daily Press and the Durango Herald, but also in the Denver Post. So we had a call the next day saying the governor had changed his mind and wanted to come to Club 20. He couldn't come to the lunch, but he was going to be there first thing in the morning. He showed up with Mayor Pena in tow to come and speak to the Club 20 group and explain why they had to break their promise to the Western Slope. And at that stage, lots of people in the audience were on his side of the issue. He had a what some people thought was a reasonable explanation, but the point is he had to come and give that explanation to the people that were assembled in the room at Club 20. There was, I guess, roughly 700 people there. And he felt like he had to show up because we were making him look bad. So that isn't something we did very often, by the way. And Governor Romer and I had a fairly good relationship and still do to this day. But he showed up because he knew that we had the power to make him look bad. It wasn't any more complicated than that. So same kind of thing, I'll say, in Washington with Secretary Bruce Babbitt. We had occasion to do that to him a time or two. And when we brought a bunch of people to Washington and he was refusing to meet with us, we put out press releases saying we have 100 of the most important leaders from all the communities in Western Colorado are going to be in Washington for 5 days, and he can't find 1 second to come and meet with them. He who owns and operates a third of Colorado, including most of the Western Slope, and it made the papers, and he showed up. He not only came to the meeting to speak to us in the Interior Auditorium, but he brought with him the Deputy Secretary and the heads, the directors of the Fish and Wildlife Service, the BLM, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the National Park Service. Not because he cared about Club 20. I actually have a theory that a week earlier he probably had never heard of Club 20, but he showed up because we were making him look bad. And so to me, the Western Slopes economy, culture, history, and way of life are worth fighting for. And so I'm glad that you're here doing this. I'm glad you're still going for it and doing everything that you can. All of you are influencers in your own way. You all have a sphere of influence of neighbors and friends and people you talk to. And so I hope you'll expand that sphere of people who want to get involved in Club 20. Make them start showing up for these meetings too, and make Denver and DC and everybody in between sit up and pay attention. I think if you do that, you wind up with more leverage than you thought you had. We always did wind up with more leverage than we ever thought we had, and frankly, more than we deserved. But that, that's how you deal with the political reality that we have to live with, which is so many elected officials and appointed officials care more about what people think of them than they really care about the issues that they're working on. So that's my pitch to you. Keep on. So thanks for inviting me to get that off my chest, and I'll talk about anything else you all want to.
Thanks, Greg. And we have just a couple minutes for questions, but Mandy Miller has one. Mandy, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, yep. I just wanted to know what's the best way to get involved with energy independence and natural resources. Part of, I think, one of the things that really irks me is that we still rely so heavily on coal. So going electric or pushing the electric initiative just means that coal is and natural gas is the wizard behind the curtain, and it's just feel-good energy and not any real change. And then the other thing that is near and dear to my heart is China shipping us all of their solar panels, and we're shipping them all of our clean coal. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, as if we're moving towards this goalpost, this clean energy, we're the only ones playing the game, and everybody else is outside the arena taking and doing their own thing. So, what's the best way to get involved to make real change and to try and educate people on where their energy comes from and try and enlighten people who don't really understand how energy is generated so that we can keep our energy independent.
Well, it is sort of a game, as you implied, because every single kind of energy requires minerals of some kind to build the stuff with. So, I have a really good friend who's proud of his electric car, and he and I go back and forth because I just tell him mine runs on oil and yours runs on coal. And he doesn't like that, but it's the reality. And it's true also whether his car were to run on electricity that came from wind machines or from solar panels. They're all made with minerals too that have to be taken out of the ground. You can't make a wind machine without oil. You can't make a solar panel without rare earth minerals and all kinds of stuff that is mined. So the truth of it is you cannot power a prosperous society without the use of minerals. The question for real leaders in my mind has always been how to do that right, how to do it in a sustainable way that our grandkids can be proud of, and that everybody can look back 100 years and say, wow, they really got that right. And in my mind, you can do that whether you're using wind or solar or coal or natural gas or oil or timber or what the resource is. You can always make it right. You can always make it better than it was before if we do that right. We don't always, and there's been all sorts of environmental abuses on the part of all of those industries. And so it does require that people get more involved in energy related things. But I'm glad that you ended, Mandy, with what you did, which was educating people about where their energy comes from, because there's so many people who just think it's one thing or the other. I'm concerned about climate change, and therefore I want to stop the use of all fossil fuels. Would that it were that simple, because if you could stop the use of fossil fuels, you're still going to get energy from somewhere. So where else does it come from, and what minerals does it take to build that? People ought to know that, and then I think they can make better decisions. So all the things that you do to hold public meetings and forums and writing op-ed pieces and all the things you can do to help publicize that are always time well spent in my mind.
Okay, do we have any last questions for Greg?
I have a comment.
Yep.
So thank you, Greg, for being on the call. Really, really appreciate your insight on all this. And I'm Merritt Linke, Grand County, and I'm sure you know where Grand County is, but our biggest employer in Grand County is the Henderson Mill. As you know, it's the molybdenum mine, and the mill part is in Grand County that actually mined in Clear Creek County and tunneled through the mountain, and it's processed in Grand County. And they're actually our biggest employer and our biggest property taxpayer by bigger than probably 9 times over number 2. But I learned
I've been there
just
a number
this.
of times.
Yeah, there you go. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But I learned this directly from an update I got from them on their CPP Community Partnership Panel just this week. And it fits right along with what you're saying, in that an electric car uses 4 times more copper than a standard car, than a gas-powered car, and that in terms of electric generation, it's 5 times more copper per megawatt of power generated to generate from a so-called green energy source than it does from a conventional energy source. So that fits right exactly with what you're saying. And I'm going along with what Mandy said. How do we get that message out to the people that need to see the big picture of where all this stuff comes from? That's the crux of the problem. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, you're so right about it, and obviously you're a walking billboard for telling people the truth about it, and I appreciate your doing that. That a lot of people think that some of the mines in Colorado closed just because the minerals played out, but it's always government policy that's behind it one way or another. So Colorado is generally thought to still have more molybdenum in the ground than any other part of North America, and so you can't say we want to go all towards electric cars, but we're opposed to mining copper. All that does is means we're going to mine the copper in Africa and China and somewhere else. If we get the minerals that we need in places like Grand County, we can at least get the minerals out of the ground in ways we can control, and we can make sure that the environmental damage is minimal, and that the site is reclaimed afterwards, and that all of the community's economic impact is properly taken care of. We can ensure all sorts of things if we do it locally. But if we just ban it and we have to get everything from molybdenum to titanium and everything else that we need somewhere on the world market, then China is going to mine it in Africa and sell it to us. And we have no control over what they're doing there, whether they're doing it environmentally, sustainably, or using child labor or what. We have no control over that. So I think we ought to just continue to tell people to begin with how much mineral reserves are still left in places like Colorado, which is still probably has the nation's biggest reserves of about 20 minerals, beginning with gold and silver and going down the line from there, and including rare earths. But most people don't know that. They think they're called rare because they don't exist anywhere except China, maybe. I don't know what people think, but it isn't true. So everything that you do to tell people where their stuff comes from is always helpful. When I was at the Department of Natural Resources, we began publishing a series of little sort of weekly reader kind of publications for grade school kids on the subject of where stuff comes from. They were called that. And so there were different ones and things in their day-to-day lives, where cars come from, where houses come from, where computers come from, simple things like that, just explaining to them where water comes from, because kids know that it's in the faucet, but they don't necessarily understand how you get it out of the river and into that faucet. And if they don't understand that, they're going to have a very different view of reservoirs and dams and pipelines than if they do understand it. So we were just starting that publication when I left DNR, and of course they spent a lot of time trying to erase all evidence that I was ever there. So they're not publishing those now, but it's still something that could be done. It doesn't have to be the state publishing them. Anybody could.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Club 20 could do that.
I made a note. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us and for the 10 years that you were executive director. I'm in my 7th year and can certainly commiserate with, not commiserate, I guess, but can relate to being in that role for a long period of time. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today.
I think that may have been the most fun 10 years of my life.
I hear you. The relationships that you make in this role are certainly lifelong relationships, which is one of the most rewarding parts.
Absolutely right. Well, thanks again for inviting me.
We are now going to have a very brief networking break, about 8 minutes. So I am going to break you out into some breakout rooms. I think we have everybody back in the main meeting room. I don't see any stragglers who haven't come back to the group. So we will go ahead and resume our schedule. And I just want to take a moment to thank the lovely Mr. Jack Bowles. We were just visiting about how the last 6 years he has met with us in person in DC. And when I reached out to his office, not very long ago and said, hey, we'd love to visit with you during our virtual event, he put the right people on it, and we have an incredible slate of EPA experts joining us for the next little bit of time. So we're so grateful for that partnership and for the relationship that we have with you all. So Jack, thank you so much for everything you've done. And I will hand it over. Jack, before I do, Jack is the Director of State and Local Government Relations for the EPA. So Jack, thank you again, and I will hand it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Christian. That is very, very kind. And we just really appreciate all of y'all, all your members, all the Club 20 folks for taking the time out to meet with us. We have a great agenda. We have a lot to talk about. But I have to say up front that I really, Christian's background really makes me miss Western Colorado. I spent most of the 90s out there, and I got to say Western Colorado is probably the most beautiful half of any state in the country. So
we sure think so. We think biasly, we think we have the better half of the state. So
yeah, yes, I think so too. I spent quite a bit of time out there. But we do have a great agenda. I want to thank Paul Ferricelli and Christian and Andrew Mutter and Jody Ossendorf for pulling this whole thing together. And I think we have time for introductions up front, Christian.
We do.
Then why don't we go with the Club 20 folks first?
I will call on you. So we'll start with Merritt Linke from Grand County.
So I am Merritt Linke. I live in Grand County, as you maybe know where that is. I'm sure you know there that is headwaters of the Colorado River. I am a Grand County Commissioner, and I am the current board chair of Club 20.
Excellent.
Charlie Oswald. There's other Charlies on here. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie Oswald from Montrose County.
Kathy Fackler.
I'm Kathy Fackler. I'm from an individual member from Durango, Colorado, and a huge fan of Club 20.
She is a huge fan of Club 20, such a big supporter of ours. Thank you, Kathy. Ray Beck.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, Ray Beck. I'm a former county commissioner for Moffat County. And I also sit on the executive committee for Club 20 and co-chair the Transportation Policy Committee. Thanks for being here.
So Kathy and Ray sit at the exact opposite ends of the Club 20 region. Ray in the northwest corner of the state, and then Kathy down in Durango in the southwest corner of the state. So we've got the whole region represented. Mandy Miller.
Hello, I'm Mandy Miller. I'm from Montrose, Colorado. I'm an individual member. And I'm head doctor. And this is my assistant, Charlotte. Thank you, Club 20 and Christian, for all the work you do. I feel very informed and I'm happy to be a member, and thank you for the guests today.
Thanks, Mandy. Bruce.
Bruce Talbot, fruit grower in Palisade, Colorado, here in Mesa County, and just listening in.
And our peaches are far superior than Georgia peaches, correct, Bruce?
We have sent peaches to Georgia, and the growers there have admitted that they are better. But we also sent them to California and had diagnostics run on them. And California could not find a statistical or biochemical or difference between the Colorado and the Californias. But when the trial was over, the Colorados went home with the employees and the Californias went in the dumpster. So there is a difference.
There is a difference. It's the Colorado River, which our next person, Chris Treese, knows all about.
Oh, thank you. Chris Treese with Garfield County on the board and also co-chair of the Water Committee. Ray, a quick question. Have you already sent Charlotte Miller a membership application?
We'll be working on that.
We accept members of all ages.
Absolutely. She's a cutie.
Paula Stepp, do you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, how are you? I have to apologize. I was half listening the first hour because I was in a fire restoration meeting.
Oh, it's okay.
My name is Paula Stepp. I two roles. I represent the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado for Club 20, and I also represent Middle Colorado Watershed Council. Just recently joined on the Water Policy Committee, and nice to meet you, Jack.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Paula. Cindy Dozier.
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Dozier. I'm the immediate past board chair for Club 20. And on behalf of Club 20, I serve on the Colorado Forest Water Alliance, as well as the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, working on forest watershed health and the connection between those two things. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Kathy Welt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Welt. I am on the Club 20 Board of Directors representing Delta County, and I work for Mountain Coal Company, one of the state's last remaining underground coal mines, but we're trying to hang on. Also, part of Welt Ranches LLC. We have about 200 head of cattle that run on federal lands.
Thanks, Kathy. Nancy Fishering. Nancy, are you there? Nancy is a fascinating human. She is from Montrose County. She was she truly is, like, everybody knows her superficially, but when she's like an onion, you peel those layers back. She and her husband, John, were some of the people who started Olathe sweet corn in Western Colorado. You may have eaten Olathe sweet corn. It is delicious. And she also is a forest restoration expert, having worked for a timber mill in our region for a number of years. So a broad wealth of knowledge she brings to the conversation. Robbie LaValle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Robbie LaValle, Delta County Manager, and I sit on the Club 20 Executive Board. So thank you for today.
Thank you. And I think, did I miss anyone? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody speak up. So Jack, I'll hand it back off for you to introduce the EPA folks.
Well, thank you, Christian. That's an amazing range of knowledge and experience on the line here. So we're going to have a great discussion. Why don't we start with our Washington, D.C. headquarters folks, and we'll save Casey for last, and then he can go right into his remarks as he introduces. How about Office of Air and Radiation? Kevin, are you on? He may not be on yet. How about the Office of Water, Russ?
Hi, everybody. Russ Kaiser. I am the Chief of the Freshwater and Marine Regulatory Branch and currently acting as the Program Development and Jurisdiction Branch Leader. Thanks, Jack.
Excellent. Thank you, Russ. And how about Elise?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elise O'Day. I'm in the Office of General Counsel at EPA.
All right. And why don't we go to the region now and have the regional folks introduce themselves. Andrew? Jody, how about we go to Jody? Some folks may be getting on later. So why don't we keep going? Rebecca, are you on yet?
Hi, Jack, this is Jody Ostendorf. I apologize, I was on mute. I wanted to let you know that Andrew couldn't be here today. He had a conflict with headquarters.
Okay. Jody is our intergovernmental and congressional liaison for EPA Region 8 Denver.
Jody, do you have my friend with you?
Your friend?
My friend is Zoe.
Zoe is here, yes.
Wonderful.
In the house.
So Zoe is a very beautiful cat. I am a fanatical animal lover, as my Club 20 members know, but I have a problem when it comes to animals. So.
It's only a problem if you think it is. Okay, Carl, are you on?
Did you want me to start, Jack?
Oh, sorry. Hey, Rebecca.
Oh, so my name is Rebecca Perrin, and I'm the Region 8 Agriculture Advisor.
Sorry, Rebecca. Thank you for joining. Carl?
Yeah, Jack. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl Daly. I'm the Acting Director for EPA Region 8's Office of Air and Radiation in Denver.
Excellent. And then Bert.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Bert Garcia. I'm the Acting Water Division Director for EPA's Region 8 office in Denver.
Excellent. Excellent. Kevin, have you joined? All right, hopefully Kevin will be on here soon. And then last but certainly not least, Casey Cadens, our Deputy Associate Administrator for Intergovernmental Relations.
Hello. How's it going, everybody? I'm sure you all have had a good round of meetings. Christian, you seem like you're really on top of it and they're lucky to have you.
I do my best. You know, it's a lot of look over here so you don't see what's happening over here, as I'm sure you all know. But
well, the graphics are impressive. The video is impressive. So I feel like I need to tell the Puget Sound folks who I used to work with really well that they need to like up their game.
Well, it's all Brittany on our team. I cannot take credit.
That's hilarious. Well, I'm mostly just sad. I haven't been back to Colorado in a number of years, but I used to get to go back quite a bit with the Western Governors Association. in my previous role, which is headquartered in Denver. So I missed the West. I'm getting to take my first flight on Friday out to visit my folks in Seattle, Washington. So hopefully we'll be able to make it out West and be able to do this in person again really soon. But just want to say thank you to Club 20, to Christian, to the team for inviting me and all of us to be with you today. So Jack mentioned I'm the new Deputy Associate Administrator for Intergovernmental Relations. And mostly I'm here just to express to you all that the Biden-Harris administration and EPA remains absolutely committed to our partnerships with state and local governments and groups like Club 20. You all bring together voices from across communities and businesses, all committed to improving the quality of life for your residents. And that's a shared goal that certainly EPA shares as well. I think Club 20 is an example of the sort of perspective that Administrator Regan brings to EPA, which is that we want to bring all voices to the table to develop solutions that work for communities. And we really recognize that your work advances a cleaner environment and a healthier and more prosperous set of communities in Colorado. And we want to support your efforts in the Biden-Harris administration. There are really significant challenges before us. We assumed office with really major crises facing the nation. And we believe strongly that we need to work together at all levels of government and with the private sector to address them together. All of the issues that we're going to work together on are not important only to the health and well-being of Colorado residents, but they also point to the importance of our need to collectively address the protection of human health and the environment despite sort of climate-fueled natural disasters. And I know that wildfires is one of the key issues that's important to you, that I think you all have been talking about or that we'll be talking about today. And I want to assure you that wildfires, and I will say fires, right? Because we know that they're not just wild, that they're being exacerbated and worsened by climate change. It's a really important issue to EPA and to me personally. I mentioned I grew up in Edmonds, Washington, and I came to EPA from Governor Jay Inslee's office, where I had the pleasure of serving as Director of Federal Affairs and Interstate Affairs. And my family was affected by the 2020 devastating wildfires and the smoke that carried up from California and Oregon, to the point that the air quality was the worst in Portland, Oregon and Seattle, Washington out of anywhere in the world. And it has really devastating impacts on public health and our ability to keep the environment safe for all people. So really appreciate your focus on that. And I know that we're looking forward to talking to you about that and working together on that. I'm grateful to be here today with an amazing team. We've got folks from the headquarters, we've got folks from the region, and there's a wealth of knowledge and experience here from EPA as well as Club 20. And I know that we're gonna make good progress together. We've got an ambitious agenda ahead of us. We're 4 months in, and we think we've made a really good start. So I know that we're acting to address climate change in a bold and ambitious and urgent way that works collaboratively with state and local communities. We're working to advance environmental justice and ensure access to clean air and clean water for all people. We're focused on advancing scientific integrity and making sure that scientific integrity is underpinning all of the work that we do and is guiding our action. And we're working really hard to revitalize the nation's water infrastructure. There's aging water infrastructure in communities all across the country, and that's partially why we're so focused on President Biden's American Jobs Plan, which I think stands to benefit the folks in Colorado and communities across the country. So right now we are continuing to sort of go through the process at President Biden's direction to review environmental rules from the previous administration to make sure that they are all consistent with science, adhere to the law, and protect public health and the environment. And that, of course, includes an issue that I know is important to Colorado and the folks on this call, which is the previous administration's Navigable Waters Protection Rule, or Waters of the United States, or WOTUS, or whatever future acronym it may or may not have. So that's an issue that is certainly under review, and I'm happy to speak about that. And I know we've got folks on the phone who are happy to speak about that as well as methane rule for oil and gas operations. So during our review of these rules, we're going to engage with a wide range of stakeholders, as well as state and local governments who are impacted by these rules and others. And on WOTUS, I will just say, quickly that our review is going to be informed by what we learned from both the Obama era rule and the Trump era rule. Administrator Regan, we're fortunate to have him. He comes from the state level where he was North Carolina Secretary of the DEQ, and he was on the receiving end of both rules. And he's committed to looking at what we've learned in his attempt to put forward an enduring rule that will really be workable going forward. In addition to that, we've taken the first step to develop a proposed rule, like I said, to tackle methane and other harmful pollutants from new and existing sources in the oil and gas industry, which is of course of significance to Colorado. The first step of that is beginning with a broad public outreach effort to gather community and stakeholder input. Those activities include, we're going to be holding training sessions on the rulemaking process so that people know how to participate. We're going to be convening listening sessions for stakeholders and opening a public docket for comments. And we're going to be holding those listening sessions from noon to 9 p.m. Eastern time every day, Tuesday, June 15th through June 17th. And so we're going to put a link in the chat just so that you all have that information about that and can hopefully share those with folks who may be interested in participating. So that was a long presentation. Thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate it. I know that you've got a lot of interest in these issues and others, and like I said, I'm here with the folks who know a lot more about these issues than I do. So I think we've already done introductions, and so I think we're now moving into Q&A. So anyway, so just want to say thank you again for having us here today. Great to meet all of you, and looking forward to a discussion.
Sure. I wanted to check to see if Kevin Culligan had joined us, or anybody else from OAR. And then I also was remiss up front. Paul Ferricelli, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Ferricelli, and I am the state liaison. And I have had the pleasure, to collaborate with Christian and some other folks, from the Club 20, to coordinate this event. So I'm very happy that you are here with us today, and thank you for inviting us in this conversation.
Paul has been amazing, and he pulled together a whole I asked Jack if he would come speak, and Jack reached out to Paul, and then a whole panel of folks came together. So just really, really incredible work. Thank you.
My pleasure. So the floor is open for Q&A. We do have a regional panel that follows, so I think this one is geared more toward national issues, national initiatives, and rulemakings. If folks have questions.
Chris, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, Chris Trees with representing Garfield County on the board of Club 20. Casey and perhaps Kelly, I wanted to follow up on the WOTUS and the invitation to follow up. I appreciated Casey's comments that you are going to be looking at the positive elements of both the Obama and the Trump era rules, because I think there are elements that are worth preserving in each. But I wondered if you can give us any idea of timing for the Biden era rule review and publication.
Sure. So I think I can't probably make like big major news on this call, but I think what I can say is that the review is ongoing. That I think it's our intention to, similar to what we're doing on the methane rule, as I described, that we will likely begin with a stakeholder-focused process. Like I said, to engage folks sort of from all sides and from all parties to get their thoughts, like you said, on what worked and what didn't work about both of the previous rules. So I think that will likely be coming in the near future. I'm trying to be sort of a little bit vague, but I think it'll probably be coming sooner than later. And again, it'll probably begin not with a proposed rule, but with a process to start engaging our stakeholder partners.
How can Club 20 or any of the individuals on this call be informed of the stakeholder process?
So Jack on our team and Paul on our team do a great job of helping to, when we're making announcements about stakeholder engagement opportunities, to disseminate those to our state and local partners. Certainly our shop here, like I said, I'm here for the Office of Intergovernmental Relations, we're really committed to making sure that folks like you hear about that. So we certainly have an interest in that. We'll make sure that Christian gets the information, and hopefully Christian can help disseminate that to the Club 20 members. And we would, of course, love for you all to participate. I know that, I've had conversations with Governor Polis's office. I think we're uniquely aware of the challenges that the state has had sort of under the current rule. And some of the waters that they're concerned about. So I know that this has been a particular interest to Colorado, and we'll certainly want to make sure that you all have a seat at the table.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Merritt, I see your hands raised.
Thank you, Christian. And this is a question probably for Casey, kind of in the intergovernmental affairs kind of role. So thank you for being on the call. I really appreciate it. And what you said a little bit earlier about forest fires, I have to jump in on that a little bit, because as maybe you know, maybe you don't, but Grand County, Colorado, when you fly into Denver and you look west at the mountains, literally we're on the other side of those mountains. So we're very close to the Front Range. But we had the second biggest fire in Colorado history, literally like 5 miles away from my house, and it burned almost 200,000 acres and 370 homes. It was pretty devastating. But what you said about climate change and forest fires, I want to go a step further with that, and what may or may not cause forest fires. But I'd like to say how forest fires are contributing to the problem, and how that maybe we can attack that on the other side. And it's kind of a triple whammy thing here, because they release millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere with these fires. And there's one report, and I can't verify this, but I'm going to quote it anyway, is that a single 100,000 acre forest fire is equivalent to the CO2 output of 6 coal-fired power plants. So, and maybe it's only 5, I don't know. The report I said 6, but I think that's an interesting comparison. And then the second thing is the heat, and all that heat is going to the atmosphere. And this particular fire was hot enough to melt silver and hot enough to melt guns in a fireproof gun safe. And the third one is that when that fire happens, and even before, when we just have a forest full of dead trees, the CO2 sink, the CO2 absorbing properties of that forest is gone. So until those forests are healthy, we don't have that CO2 absorbing capability of the soils. So I know it's sort of outside the wheelhouse of EPA, but it's all connected. Everything is connected to everything. And I'd like to know maybe how you could attack that and find out how that EPA could also work with the Forest Service or with the BLM or with other environmental agencies to help to combat and be more actively managing these forest fires, which, like I said, are contributing to climate change.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. And of course, we're deeply concerned, as you are, with the air quality impacts of fires that are like unplanned fires. I think what we can say, right? We know that there are some prescribed burns that are managed appropriately, but they're really, like you said, really significant air quality impacts. And like I said, my folks were all sort of trapped indoors for a period of time. It's not only harmful for the environment, but it's also harmful for public health when folks get sort of trapped inside and have to cough on smoke for days on end, let alone facing the destruction of life and property. So I just want to say, so sorry for the loss that your community has suffered. And certainly it's felt all across the West. I think two things. One is, in case it's interesting, I just think that it's a helpful indicator, but EPA recently released our climate indicators report for the first time in 4 years, showing some significant data on sort of things like fires, things like hurricanes, that show just sort of the increasing incidence and worsening impacts of wildfires over time. And so I think that's helpful data that you might be interested in looking at. And so I can drop a link into the chat for that, and helps to sort of describe the link between climate change and wildfires. So happy to provide that information, but I will just say, we absolutely, agree that this requires coordination across federal agencies. And we are, I know that the administrator has developed really close working relationships with Secretary Haaland and other colleagues to work on these issues together. Things, things around managing fires and managing forests and the impacts on air quality absolutely cut across multiple federal agencies. And so I can just assure you that Administrator Regan and our agency are committed to those sort of cross-agency partnerships, as well as our partnerships across levels of government.
So thank you. Can I just do a quick follow-up, Christian? So Senator Bennett was actually out here and had his feet in a middle of a mitigation project. And the words right out of Senator Bennett's mouth were that what we've been doing isn't working. So I think there is kind of a culture change in terms of managing these forests. So he might be a good ally to help to present or a path forward to getting some more active forest management out here. So just wanted to throw that in there too. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I think some of it, Merritt, is showing and telling the story of what healthy forest management looks like, because I think that when you talk about healthy forest management, a lot of people go in their minds to the widespread cutting down of trees, the clear cutting of trees, and that's just not done anymore. And I think that's somewhat of the perception of some folks who maybe aren't as intimately involved in the strategic mitigation of some of our challenges. In Merritt's neck of the woods, there was a significant beetle kill stand that sat dead for a number of years. And as everybody drove by, they thought, well, this is just a tinderbox ripe for the picking. But there were challenges of getting in there and cutting down those dead trees so that the healthy trees could thrive and actually defend themselves against forest fire. So I think we have to tell the story a little bit differently and tell the narrative a little bit differently and actually show visually what it looks like and what it doesn't look like.
I think you're right.
Yep. I was just going to say one more thing. That's a great point, Christian. I think it's an all of the above approach. I think there's definitely some logging that needs to take place in some of these areas. There's I guess an economic advantage to that there, where we're paying the Forest Service for stumpage or whatever the price to remove those trees instead of paying somebody for a stewardship project. So there's that, but there's also grazing, which removes fields too. And there's solid evidence that grazing, it does act as fire breaks. So again, I know I'm kind of preaching to the wrong group here, but you did say you were intergovernmental affairs, so here we go. And then, of course, just the mitigation project, cutting fire breaks, as Senator Bennett witnessed there, to try to direct or manage where a fire, if it started, would go, or protect values at risk kind of things too. So I think it's really an all of the above approach to the forest fires. Thank you.
Yeah, and Christian, the one thing I was just going to offer is, if you don't already have a connection with the Intergovernmental Affairs Office with Secretary Holland and the Department of the Interior, I'd be happy to get you our contact.
I would love that. I used to have a connection. My connection is no longer. So
great. I'll send it over.
Thank you. Ziska, we'll go to you and then we'll move on to the next panel.
Okay, I apologize for coming in late to the meeting. I just want to mention that I was talking with our Pitkin County Commissioner, Greg Boschman, recently, and he was talking about a methane capture project that they're trying to do over in Pitkin, which, as he said, would actually eliminate more carbon going into the atmosphere than the entire CORP program has done, which is significant. And right now, their major, what they're working on the most is trying to actually locate where that methane leak is happening. Now, I know he's been doing a little bit of work with, or the staff has been doing a little bit of work with Senator Bennett, but is there somebody at EPA that he could contact and work with directly?
Jack, do we have someone on the phone from OAR?
Nope, Jack, you're on mute.
Probably the best first stop would be the regional office. Carl, do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, Jack, they could certainly contact me. I'm not the expert, but there are folks in our regional office that have done a lot with fugitive methane emissions, working with industry and looking at so-called methane hotspots. So I'd be happy to take an email or a phone call and relay them on to folks that have a lot more technical background in that area.
Great, thank you. And if there's any way just to drop contact information in chat or direct message, that would be even better.
Right. Yeah. I'll just put my phone number and email in the chat box.
Awesome.
Jack, I think we're ready to move on.
All right, so why don't we turn it over to our esteemed regional experts for their presentations.
Okay, so I think I may be up first, Bert Garcia. Again, I am the Acting Water Division Director for Region 8. I'm going to talk a little bit about wildfires in Colorado and the effects on drinking water, water quality, and some of the opportunities that EPA offers in response. I'll begin by reviewing some of the impacts of wildfires on those aquatic resources and on drinking water, and then discuss, again, some of the support that we can provide. First, let me say one thing about the Clean Water Act. When we talk about the Clean Water Act, I think it's helpful to remember that the Clean Water Act seeks to protect uses of water. Those uses include, for example, agricultural irrigation, livestock watering, providing clean drinking water, supporting aquatic life, and recreation such as wading and swimming. Let me just pause here for a moment. Jack, I see your image is, at least on my computer, is lit up. So I'm wondering if you're showing to folks or if I am showing on the screen and how.
There's not currently a screen share happening.
Okay.
So
great.
Bert, if you want to click on the green screen share at the bottom, you should be able to share your screen.
Actually, I don't have a presentation to share. I just want to make sure that we have the right.
Yeah, we see you, Bert.
We're in Brady Bunch mode.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm not used to Zoom. We use Teams, and so this is new technology for me. So let's go over some of the wildfire impacts, many of which you on the West Slope are familiar with, some of which may be new to you. We all know that wildfires in the U.S. have increased in frequency and burn area since the mid-'80s. In addition to the direct destruction caused by these fires, they also cause physical changes, and they release pollutants that can affect human health and water qualities. For example, wildfires can change stream flows. They can lead to increased water temperatures due to the loss of stream cover. They accelerate erosion, and they release sediment, dissolved organic compounds, and metals into waters. Drinking water treatment and storage can also be affected. High turbidity and sediment make water treatment processes less effective, and additional organic matter in the water supply increases the levels of cancer-causing disinfection byproducts. So here's an example. In Paradise, California, portions of the drinking water distribution system became dry during their wildfire. The elevated temperatures and smoke damaged the underground plastic piping, which allowed volatile organic chemicals from the pipes to be released into the drinking water supplied to homes. Other uses that are impacted include recreational uses that are threatened when nitrogen and phosphorus are released from wildfires. These pollutants act as aquatic fertilizers. They lead to dense aquatic plant growth, such as harmful algal blooms that could then affect boating, swimming, and fishing. And of course, excess erosion from wildfires can impact agricultural water storage and delivery systems. In many cases, the loss of ground cover leads to sediment accumulating in reservoirs, canals, and ponds, and interfering with irrigation infrastructure. And pollutants from wildfires, such as salts and metals, may affect crop development and water uptake. And wildfires can change runoff and groundwater storage patterns, which then affect when water will be available for ag uses due to lower summer stream flows. So that's enough of the bad news about the effects of wildfires on water quality and water uses. Let's talk about what EPA can offer and support. First, EPA's core water programs that are generally carried out by the state, in this case CDPHE, can help address some of these impacts as they monitor and assess water quality and support and oversee drinking water systems, and implement watershed restoration programs. More directly responsive to events like wildfires, Region 8 has a water emergency response team that we call the WERT, W-E-R-T, that can be tasked by FEMA during major emergencies to assess the damage to drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. These assessments help local facilities receive emergency funding and get back online. So here's some examples of this team's work. Our Region 8, some of our Region 8 team assisted Region 10 in responding to the 2020 Oregon wildfires. 5 of our staff worked with colleagues from EPA offices in San Francisco and Seattle virtually to evaluate wildfire damage to several small rural water and wastewater systems. Working from their homes, the team gathered the information they needed to determine specific facility components that were damaged in the fires, and they then developed cost estimates for repair or replacement that were then used by FEMA and the Oregon State Health Authority. So it was a great test of the system to see that despite working from home, we were able to pull together people from across the country to provide the support. And then in November of 2020, a 2-member team from our Denver and Seattle offices was deployed to assist the erosion threat and reduction team, supporting recovery for the Oregon fires. That team consisted of representatives from FEMA, USDA, the Forest Service, Oregon DEQ and EPA, and they assessed impacted watersheds to prioritize erosion control funds to protect 53 public water systems that were impacted by the wildfires. Last year in Colorado, you all know we had a tremendous wildfire season. Some of the damage to infrastructure included from the Cameron Peak and East Troublesome fires, a number of Forest Service campgrounds where the water infrastructure was completely destroyed. And even today, impacts remain to the city of Fort Collins, where they continue to monitor sediment and ash levels in the Poudre River to avoid treatment impacts and determine if they need to use backup water sources. So 2020 was a significant fire season. As you know, there continues to be drought and extreme drought in parts of the West. We may very well experience another challenging season in 2021. And we of course have our WERT and the core programs available to assist. So I'll stop there and see what questions folks may have.
Now, Jack, did we want to hear from all of our Region 8 folks and then do some Q&A, or did you want to pepper Q&A in?
I think peppering is fine. Sometimes it's hard once somebody has a question on their mind about a particular topic, they want to ask it, and sometimes it kind of fades over time. So if anybody has questions now, please.
I do see that Paula Stepp has her hand raised. Paula, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Bert, just real quickly, it's kind of interesting. I introduced myself earlier saying I was in a fire restoration meeting, first hour of Club 20 meeting today in our fly-in. And so I was trying to catch both of what was going on. But one of the big things that kind of came up was the opportunities for state and federal help and the frustrations in working with FEMA. Just red tape of trying to, and in particular, we were speaking to the fires I'm involved in are Grizzly Creek and Pine Gulch, but people who were involved with the Cameron Peak and East Troublesome fire were just, it was kind of eye-opening to me, kind of new to this arena, on people almost giving up working through the FEMA process and looking for other alternatives. Is there something that can help streamline this kind of aid that, our fire community, the communities affected by fire are immediate? I'm racing around trying to get water quality projects going on, just to what you had just mentioned and what that's going to mean to intake to public utilities from 6 towns downstream from me. I know our fire is not even close to the size of the impact that Grand County had with East Troublesome and what they're seeing from the Cameron Peak fire. So how do we work with government to go, we need this now, and we need your help in streamlining it?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Paula. You know, I've not worked with FEMA directly. My sense is they tend to get overwhelmed. I mean, we've had so many fires, so many natural disasters the last few years. They get stretched pretty thin. But specifically on the items that we're connected with, infrastructure and watersheds. What I've seen work well is where local utilities reach out and have good communication with the state, which is sort of a first line for them. And then we work directly with the state and with the utilities, so that at least if we are aware of the situations you all have, the problems you have, the challenges you've got, we can be primed so that when FEMA then tasks EPA under a support function for us to actually mobilize and provide support, you know, we've already got some knowledge of what's happened and we've got our contacts made and we can work faster that way. But in terms of working, you know, expediting the work with FEMA, I frankly don't have an answer for that. I just know that they do get stretched pretty thin.
Well, it is good to know that they can reach out to the EPA to at least have some facilitation going on as these projects. I think in particular, one of the concerns that came up was surrounding power poles and kind of giving up on that, kind of going, okay, I've got to find a different source. And I just think it's something that should be, people should be aware of at the federal level, that yes, we need this help. And yes, we really appreciate the funding. But we, you know, whatever the community is, whether it's California, Oregon, and all of our communities in Colorado, we need it quickly and we need to do it easily.
Sure. Let me make one clarification, well, if I may, that was some of the mechanics behind this. So for EPA to be brought in to work on an emergency like this, we specifically have to be tasked by FEMA. So when they provide us that tasking, that order, then that's when we can start expending and working directly for it. But what, you know, the part that we're talking about here is just making things known, making the communications, working with the state, so everyone's aware of what the situation is. That way, if and when we're tasked, we can move out much more quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I was just going to add in, as a former congressional staffer, bringing those kinds of groups together to address local emergency problems like we're going to have within Glenwood Canyon this summer was something that I worked on when I was there at that time. So I don't know if that would be appropriate to try to loop in the Senate staff or even the Congresswoman's staff to provide assistance in bringing everybody together. Nancy, you had a question?
My question was, you mentioned erosion control funds, Bert, and thank you for your time. But you get tasked by FEMA, so you don't get brought in the original BEAR team that comes in and assesses the mulching that needs to be done and that type of thing. Is that correct?
I don't know that we get tasked in the initial BEAR teams. I think that's really a Forest Service function. But what EPA provides is non-point source funds. We call 319 funds, Section 319 of the Clean Water Act. Those funds are conveyed to the state, and then the state distributes those to watersheds. And so those funds are there to protect watersheds, and they're available to local entities. So while we're not involved in those initial assessments, other than through a FEMA tasking, that certainly is a source of funding that can be used for those kinds of erosion controls.
Okay, thank you.
But I think we're ready to move on. Jack, I think Carl is up next. Is that right?
I think Rebecca just went on screen. So how about Rebecca go next?
Well, it's up to y'all. I mean, I'm not talking about wildfire. So if you want to get all the wildfire conversations done now, that's fine. If you would like to consider me the cream filling of a sandwich where we talk about something different than wildfires, I'm happy to do that too.
I'll defer to you, Jack.
Carl, do you want to go next, and maybe you can add what from the air side on wildfires, and also continue on with what you were going to talk about.
Sure, we can save Rebecca for last. Save the best for last, right, Rebecca?
There you go.
And hopefully I've turned on my webcam. I'm like Bert. We do not use Zoom. We use Teams. So we're struggling a bit here. So good afternoon again, everybody. Carl Daly, the acting director of the air program at EPA Region 8 in Denver. Now I have a few slides, so I'm going to roll the dice here and see what happens when I share screen, see if I can bring up my my PowerPoint.
I feel confident in you, Carl.
Yeah. Let's see what happens. Is anyone seeing a picture of Gothic Mountain near Crested
Yes.
Butte?
We see your PowerPoint version, the PowerPoint view. Yes.
Okay, so I'll turn it into a presentation, maybe. There we go.
There we go.
All right, so thanks. Wildfire smoke health impacts, and I just, as a little bit of an introduction, I threw up on this slide a few headlines that you've probably all seen from the Denver Post over the years. One from 2018, and then obviously a couple from last summer when we had a lot of fires going on, and then just a picture of what you all know these fires look like, and what the public sees and immediately becomes concerned about health impacts from breathing the smoke. I will say before I get going, we work really closely with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the Air Pollution Control Division. The state health department run all the regulatory air monitors in Colorado. They also issue their own health alerts on air quality. So they're definitely a leader, and we defer a lot of the health impacts advisories to the state on air quality issues, and particularly in wildfire smoke. Just as a quick background for you all, from wildfires, the big pollutants that we worry about or are concerned about are particulate matter, and EPA breaks that down into two categories, what we call PM10, which is a size less than 10 micrometers or microns, and then PM 2.5, which is even smaller. And you can see relative to this cartoon of a human hair and a grain of sand, just how small of particles we're talking about, even at the PM 10 level. But certainly at the PM 2.5 level, we're talking extremely small particles that can be released during fires. And because they're so small, they can get way down in lung tissue, into the body, and can cause a variety of health impacts. The cardiovascular system can really be impacted by breathing fine particulate. And so EPA does have air quality standards around coarse and fine particulate, PM10, PM 2.5, and ozone can also be formed during wildfires. It's typically considered an urban problem, with cars and industry, and like a picture of Denver here on a smoggy day. But wildfires release the same chemicals that an urban area will release, and you can get ozone forming because of wildfires. EPA uses this air quality index to alert the public, and the state uses something similar. This is all online. If you go to airnow.gov, you can see what the real-time data is for the monitors in your area, and it's color-coded. And obviously green is considered a good air quality day, no problems. As the levels of pollution increase, the particulate matter or the ozone, the air quality can become yellow. And then once you exceed EPA's health-based standard, what we call our National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the color changes to orange. And there, orange means that sensitive members or sensitive groups in the public may experience health effects. And this is folks that are subject to asthma or have other underlying health conditions where breathing, poor air quality, can make those worse. And then once you get to the red level, then all populations can experience some health effects, and obviously sensitive groups could experience even more. And occasionally, unfortunately, we even get to the purple level, which that when you're right next to a wildfire can exist, and that's where people are told to shelter in place and close their windows and try to stay indoors. One recent development EPA's come up with that we think is going to be really helpful for informing the public on health effects from wildfires and smoke is this fire and smoke map, which is again part of the AirNow system. And the URL to get to it is fire.airnow.gov. And I just have a static shot of the map from a couple days ago, but it's interactive and you can move it around. The blue dot over here is where I was when I accessed the map, the app, and the green indicates that day, 2 days ago, air quality was not surprisingly good across the whole state. So here's Grand County, and here's the Western Slope over here, Grand Junction. So we're green pretty much all over. We have the larger circles indicate regulatory monitors that the state of Colorado maintain. Those are static monitors. The smaller squares are a new development. There's a lot of what we call sensors for air quality that are out in the public domain now. Anyone can buy these mobile sensors. You carry them around, on your body or in your vehicle, and they'll report real time. And they actually now are linked with EPA's AirNow system. So we get data from a lot of these sensors, and we can include them in these maps. And that's a good addition because a lot of times, people would say, well, I can't see across the street at my house, and yet, the AirNow map isn't showing anything more than say yellow or orange. But if there was a sensor out there in that area, that could pick up that hot spot. So that's good data to have. And just as a comparison, here's a grab of the map for the whole country back in September, early September, and there must have been a lot of fires going on in California that day. We have some red dots from the monitors out there, and this is actually where we've turned on the smoke plume, and you can see this gray or darker gray. These are the smoke plumes. Look like they're leaving California, heading to Colorado, and you can see that we have some orange and yellow that day impacting Colorado, and Denver would be a little further to the east there. So that shows you the whole country and what it looks like when you have an active day. And just for some data reference, this is a plot we put together, on superimposed on top of the color-coded levels in the air quality index. And this one's from Mesa County, so in Grand Junction. And this is all the plots for ozone and PM 2.5 from the regulatory monitors. The sensor data is not included on this plot, but this just shows you the trend through the year. I mean, on the Western Slope, we generally have pretty good air quality. It's almost always in the good, and even down at the very bottom here. But you get to the summer, we had the fires, and we creep up, and we're in the moderate area, and we do have a few data points that for that day did get up into the orange, unhealthy for sensitive groups at that particular monitor site in Grand Junction. And then here's another one. This is in Rio Blanco County at Rangeley. There's a monitor there, and you see the same kind of thing that almost for the whole year, good air quality data. And then, we hit summer, the fires get going, and we have a few daily data points that are in the moderate, and then just a few that get up into the unhealthy for sensitive groups. So to wrap up, as we've already talked about, 2020 was a really unprecedented year for wildfires and smoke in the Western US. Regardless, the smoke didn't greatly influence the regulatory ozone and PM 2.5 data on the Western Slope. So I think that's good news, but obviously the corollary though is that we can have these localized hotspots, and just because a regulatory monitor in Grand Junction or in Rangeley doesn't show a large air quality impact, that doesn't mean that as you get closer to the fire, you can't have some pretty poor air quality there. So that's why we're excited about having that sensor data now included in those AirNow maps. So I think that's all I had, and I can now Well, were we doing questions? I think we're doing questions now. So I'll stop and see if there's any questions. And I can't see hands, so.
I'm not seeing any right now, but we may have some more after Rebecca speaks.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. So as I mentioned, I am the Region 8 Agriculture Advisor, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you today. And before I share a couple of quick updates, I wanted to give all of you a background on how EPA engages with the ag community generally. So I am one of 10 regional agriculture advisors. There's also a national ag advisor office, and our collective role is to serve as liaisons between EPA and the ag community. And we ensure that the ag community, which for us is producers, ag associations, various agribusinesses, right? People who are kind of living, breathing, earning a living through ag, receive timely information from us on issues that may impact them. And then we help bring your questions, issues, and ideas back to EPA. So in a nutshell, we explain EPA to ag and ag to EPA. And one of the many ways we do this in Region 8 is through a listserv in which we provide curated information that may be of interest to ag in our region. And we do this because it's an opportunity for us to invite people to kind of engage directly with us and any questions they may have of that information. We also host ag roundtables. We try and get out and about and do tours, field tours with staff and political leadership. So there's a variety of ways in which we are actively seeking to engage with that community, not just to better understand the issues that they're facing that are directly related to EPA and the issues that we may regulate or have programs on, but so that we can also just understand generally what are the other issues that are facing this community. And it helps us to have a better appreciation for the information that we bring to you, one, and two, a better appreciation for the other challenges that you're dealing with your businesses outside of the environmental realm. The National Ag Office also manages the Farm, Ranch, and Rural Communities Committee, which is a federal advisory committee. And that group is currently consists of about, I believe, 31 agricultural producers or small community representatives. And they are working to provide advice to EPA on several topics involving ag and water quality, ag and water reuse, ag and food waste, and ag and pesticides. So at any given point, there may be something going on related to ag and EPA that we're working on nationally, or at a regional level, or with our state departments of agriculture. But I wanted to flag a couple of items that I thought might be of interest to this group. So the first is that this week, EPA announced that we're accepting applications for a $1 million national grant initiative through the Pesticides Environmental Stewardship Program. EPA is looking to support projects that explore innovative practices, technologies, education, and non-regulatory solutions to adopt integrated pest management or IPM technologies. We anticipate that $1 million is going to fund about 10 projects, so one project per region. And interested states, universities, and federally recognized tribes who want to apply for this grant need to submit their application by July 9. So if you have any project ideas that you guys have discussed as a group, we encourage you to reach out to those eligible entities to discuss your idea and see if it qualifies and potentially submit a proposal. The next idea is that EPA is currently selecting new members to serve on our FIFRA Scientific Advisory Panel. And we are requesting public comments on nominees on or before June 21st. The advisory panel serves as the primary scientific peer review mechanism and provides independent scientific advice and recommendations to EPA on the health and safety issues related to pesticides. As many of you know, EPA registers all pesticides nationally, so it's important to receive feedback from the public on nominees so we can select the best candidates for this panel. The next item that I wanted to flag for you is not all ag related, but given the diversity of backgrounds of this group and how contentious water is in the West, I like to bring it up in most remarks that I give with anybody who's in ag production. And so for a little history, in February of 2019, EPA announced that we would facilitate the development of a national water reuse action plan, otherwise known colloquially as the RAP. And since then, there have been more than 100 federal, state, tribal, local, and water sector partner organizations that have helped to build capacity for communities of all sizes to consider and pursue water reuse practices, enhance their resilience, and strengthen local water infrastructure. The RAP strives to ensure that water reuse is accessible, straightforward to implement, and sensitive to climate and environmental justice considerations. It currently features more than 40 actions proposed and led by partners and/or by EPA. These actions seek to drive progress on reuse and address local and national barriers across a range of topics, including technical, institutional, and financial. And EPA recently released the RAP update on collaborative progress, which is a report that showcases key accomplishments for the first year of this implementation and forecasts milestones and goals for this year and beyond. And while RAP is an important framework to advance water reuse, its success is directly tied to the contributions and collaborations from members of the water community. And the ag water, this should be of no surprise to anybody on the Western Slope, can be viewed as an available pot of water. And so it's very important that the ag sector has a seat at the table for the parts of this effort that may impact them or where they have expertise. And so one of the things that EPA has been trying to do nationally is figure out how to better engage the agricultural sector in these conversations. It's also important to note that EPA does not require or restrict any type of water reuse. Generally, states maintain that primary regulatory authority in developing governance structure for water reuse, which leads me to the last item that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is that some of you may already be aware, but Colorado is currently doing outreach related to the development of a regulation on direct potable reuse for water. And my understanding is that regulated entities requested that CDPHE begin developing a direct potable reuse specific rule through an engagement process. Region 8's role is that we're currently providing technical assistance to this effort. And my understanding is that there has been active stakeholder engagement and there'll be more opportunities for this summer. So if that's something that this group would be interested in learning more about or figuring out how to best participate with the state on, if it's not on your radar, we would be very happy to get you connected with the state to make sure that your perspectives are being considered. So in closing, thank you so much for your time. I can provide links to all of this information that I've shared because I know I just dropped a lot on you. You are always welcome to reach out to me because I know many of you identified as producers. If you have any ag-related questions on any ag-related topics, if I don't know the answer, we can track it down, or potentially one of my cohorts in another region may have done a project specifically related to that. So we can definitely get you more information. If you'd like to be added to the Region 8 agricultural listserv, you just need to send me an email. I will put my email in the chat. Nationally, there is also a rural outreach email that is curated by the Ag Advisor's Office, and I can share that information with you if that's also of interest. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think the more information you can share in the chat, the better, and that goes for all of our presenters. Julia on our team is capturing all of those links down so that we can share that information back out to our members after this meeting is over. So we would love to have those resources.
Perfect. I will work on that. I shared a lot of information, so I will see if I can't populate all of those links in the amount of time that we are still invited to be participating on this call with you. But if not, I will circle back around through Jack's group and make sure you have it.
Excellent. Do we have questions for Rebecca? Ray Beck has his hand raised. Ray, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, Rebecca, and the whole EPA team. Jack, thank you for that. I guess I would echo what Christian said. The more information and education that we can get here on the Western Slope to try to understand your perspective, I think would be very beneficial for the Club 20 region. Because at the end of the day, the decisions that you guys make impacts us one way or the other. I'll use an example, like the bill that's going through the state legislature, the PAWS Act, when it comes to ag. I mean, that's going to be detrimental to agriculture, and agriculture is a big part of our quality way of life here in Western Colorado and rural communities, even on the eastern slope. And so anything that we can do or you can do to in partnership with us to educate, to go through the NEPA process, whatever that looks like, to help preserve our quality way of life and not have to be the recipients of heavy-handed decisions that come down from levels that we have no control of. So I'm just throwing that out respectfully, and really do thank all of you for being on the presentation today. Very informational, very educational. Thank you.
And can I respond to that? So
Yes.
Ray, I was going to say, like, I think that the better we get at understanding the unique issues that are facing producers in our region, just helps us to make sure that when we're curating that information, that we're getting, we're not blasting you with all of the national stuff, right? We're sending you things that we think are of relevance or should be on your radar, given the kind of production that you do in our region. The other thing that's of value is that when we, why we work so hard as regional ag advisors to build relationships with producers is so that we can pick up the phone. If we're hearing something that we're like, I remember talking to Ray about this a couple of years ago or another month ago, and I remember he said X, Y, and Z, and I just need to troubleshoot something, right? If we have that kind of relationship, then we can have those conversations. We can work with you to make sure that we're bringing out regional or national experts to have more developed conversations, so that it's not just me as an individual getting that information, that we're relaying it back not only to program staff, but at leadership levels too. So, anything that we can do to kind of build those relationships, I'll just tell you at the regional level, we're interested.
Hey, Rebecca, I have a question, and I don't know if this is the best question or not, but it's just curiosity. What, if anything, is the EPA doing to foster innovation or recycled, like well water, that can be cleaned up to an appropriate TDS for irrigation or to gift to local farms?
When you say well water, are you referring to oil
Like
and gas well water?
produced, yeah, correct.
Produced water?
Sorry. Yeah,
All right.
produced
So
water.
at this, I'm going to ask if Bert wants to weigh in on that as the Water Division Acting Director. If he doesn't, then.
I do. I can. So we have been doing some work under the Water Reuse Action Plan that Rebecca noted, to look at all water streams that might be used again or more effectively and more efficiently. And one of those, of course, is produced water. So we are doing some work to understand how does one go about segregating different qualities of produced water, and then what kinds of treatment would be necessary so that you can then distinguish, because all produced waters, as you know, aren't the same. Some are very high quality, some are very saline and have other constituents in them. So we're trying to tease that out to see, well, what is the potential there for reuse? So I can say we're doing that work, but a lot of folks are involved, and of course, the producers themselves have to have an incentive to treat that water so it can be reused. So the economics are important as well.
And so,
Does that
Mandy,
help?
if that's something that you're interested in more on, we can certainly get you connected up with the RAP folks too nationally, because there may be a group of people who are working on that specific topic related to the plan, and that you may be interested in participating in that.
I'd like to also add that EPA has a very good website on unconventional oil and gas development, and they have resources there and studies that other states have done about produced water. So I'll drop that link into the chat as well.
Nancy, I saw that your hand was raised. Do you still have a question?
I could, but if it's irrelevant, just tell me it's irrelevant. Hi, I'm Nancy Fishering. And my question is when we adopted national food safety standards, there's a standard of testing our ag irrigation water. And that's numerous times per field, per year. We have to drive it an hour and a half away, has to be kept cold. We need it immediately tested for whatever's in the water. And I don't really understand why that makes our food safer. I understand if you were putting on top of it, I'm talking about ag irrigation water that makes the seed grow, and it's in food safety. And I don't know if that's an EPA driven thing or where that even came from. Do you have any idea on that?
It comes from FDA. It's not an EPA driven thing. So it's something that was required of them underneath the FSMA, Food Safety Management Act. And so we can probably work to find you some contacts over there to have additional conversations with about that, but it's not something that's driven by EPA.
It's just one of those things we go, okay, that's just one more thing we have to fit into a very busy day. So
I'm sorry about that.
I didn't think it probably came from EPA, but that helps.
Next year, FDA, Nancy.
There you go, Christian.
Do we have any more questions for our amazing EPA panel? I'm not seeing any. Jack, do you want to wrap it up here and provide any concluding remarks that you may have?
Sure, I'll be very brief. Just want to start off by thanking you, Christian, and Paul and Jody for putting together such an amazing meeting. This was really great. Thanks to our regional EPA folks and Casey and the headquarters folks too. But the biggest thanks for all of you for taking the time to meet with us and meet with everybody else. I think this organization is great and does a phenomenal job. Christian does a phenomenal job in representing your interests at the state level, at the national level, with various agencies, with your delegation. And it's always a great pleasure to meet with you and talk with you. And hopefully next time, if you want to fly to DC, we'll be glad to meet with you live in person.
Well, Jack, maybe we'll host you here in Grand Junction.
I would love that.
Even better.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I can't really give a round of applause too much, but thank you guys so much. This was such an incredible panel. And I know this has occupied most of Paul's time for the last 10 days. Paul, thank you for giving me so much of your time and being such an absolute joy and pleasure to work with. I really appreciate it. And we as Club 20 appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you all.
So we will now have a quick networking break. So we will put you into some breakout rooms. Before we do that, we want to thank our title sponsor of today's virtual meeting, Chevron. We could not do this without their support. We do have our next presenter joining us. So I will do a quick introduction so we waste no time. Chris, you probably see a couple familiar faces, at least Astor up there in the corner.
I do, and I so apologize. I had trouble getting in. I didn't mean to be late, so I hope I didn't hold you up.
Not a problem at all. We just finished a little virtual networking session, so doing what we can in a virtual world. We are so excited to be joined today by Chris French, who is the Acting Deputy Undersecretary for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Chris began his USDA career in 1991 on the Coronado National Forest in Arizona as a volunteer in recreation. And from there, he's worked in planning, NEPA, fire, fuels, wildlife, and recreation and wilderness. So again, Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and please take it away.
Great. So really nice to be with everyone. And again, my apologies that I guess this is a fly-in. So
it's virtual.
Right.
Our PowerPoint has been very flight friendly with what did we have, our like our VIP lounge reception, you know, all of that fun stuff. So
okay, so let me just start from a place of saying I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk with all of you. And I know that recently the secretary was was out on the east side of Colorado on the Front Range talking about some of our bigger priorities. And I want to cheer on that because they are front and center and critical for us right now. So where I would say that for USDA, and I'm going to focus my conversation primarily around my area, which is overseeing the U.S. Forest Service and where I've spent a lot of my career. Our focus right now is to, in the broader policy that the administration has put out, which I think most of you are probably aware of at this point, which is, initiatives that are in around creating better relationships with the federal government, with tribes, really focusing on the role of federal government in equity and the way that our services are delivered that way, focusing in on jobs and making sure that we're looking at supply chains that are focusing on domestic production of things and really focused on the types of work that we're going to do in service to any of the other priorities are focused on making sure that we're always having that lens of jobs as we go forward. And then a number of the big executive orders that we spend a lot of our time in here is in around the climate executive orders. And there's multiple pieces to that. And I want to translate some of those higher level administration priorities towards, towards what it actually means to us and what we're focusing on right now in terms of those priorities. So I want to start first in and around climate. So for us, the work that we've done and the way that the administration's policy has come out, there's a strong focus for us right now on ensuring that our forested systems in this country, whether they're in federal ownership or they are in private ownership, state ownership, county ownership, that we are incentivizing and providing the resources so that those forests can remain forests, be working forests, be resilient forests, forests that can withstand low-level fire, but not burn at rates that affect our communities, or essentially convert those forests or impact those forests in a way that those forests are no longer able to help mitigate climate change, or that they're no longer able to absorb water and provide and release water in a sustained way to our communities that are experiencing drought, as an example. And so our focus is really around how do you keep areas natural, keep working forests as forests, and create management regimes that are focused on how to keep them healthy so that they are playing this critical role that we know they should be playing in mitigating climate change. The forests of the United States right now, they're the largest terrestrial system that we have that directly mitigates greenhouse gases. 14% of all the greenhouse gases that are produced in the United States every day are absorbed by trees across the United States. Keeping those forests healthy and in that space where they can continue to play that role of absorbing greenhouse gases is critical to any long-term climate strategy. The reality is, though, that there is this short-term focus that we have to focus on because we don't want to lose the ability of those forests to play that role. So thinning those forests, returning prescribed fire into those forests, it creates a space where it not only protects communities, it provides jobs, and it also ensures that the forests are healthy and resilient to provide long-term mitigation to climate. The scope of which we need to treat our forests, we are directly acknowledging has to change from where we've been. And so in the president's jobs plan, the American Jobs Plan, he has clearly said that we need to make these large-scale investments to actually start treating this wildfire problem at the scale of which is presenting to us right now. all of you experienced this in Colorado last year. We had our largest fire season on record. We know that in Colorado, as an example, that the average cost to suppress fires and then do the subsequent work to recover from those, whether it's fixing infrastructure, replanting trees, or all that work just on the lands themselves costs us almost $50,000 an acre versus maybe $1,500 an acre if we had treated those acres before a fire came. It just makes good sense. And so there's a recognition that the type of resources we need have to be scaled up tremendously from what we're doing right now, at least 2 to 4 times what we're doing right now. And so the focus is around that. It makes good sense in terms of protecting our communities. It makes good sense in terms of creating jobs, and it makes good sense for a long-term climate policy. And that's really our focus right now. There's also a strong focus on connecting people to public lands. Last year, the National Forests saw an 18 million person increase in the number of people that were using national forests in just 1 year. That's huge. We know that during COVID that people were going to places to go hike, to be in spaces where they could, and this was one of our biggest 1-year increases that we've ever seen. We had about 80% of our recreation areas open during most times, working with local health restrictions, working with partners, working with the ski industry, and trying to provide spaces for folks in a way that was safe, but also provided them those connections. We recognize how important this is to gateway communities in terms of the economics associated with recreation on national forests. But we also recognize that for too long, that the agencies have not been funded in a way that to provide those services in the way that they should. And so we're focused right now on increasing the resources, and you'll see that in the president's budget, to really significantly increase the resources to the National Forest System so they can provide basic services for the public. And this is important because when we're not doing that, a lot of times those, it impacts our local law enforcement officers, it impacts our local counties in terms of helping upkeep of roads, and often can turn, it can turn user experiences from one of a positive to a negative, which affects local economies. We're also very much focused in on connecting people with our lands. And so the President's Job program through the Climate Conservation Corps, the CCC, is looking at how to create a lot more jobs with folks coming out and doing work in terms of infrastructure on our national forests, helping reduce wildland fuel loads in a way that not only provides good, meaningful work, great outcomes to stewarding these lands and to the communities that are part of them, but also creating long-term connections of people to forests. And I think that's critically important. So I'm gonna pause there. I think I've been talking for about 10, 15 minutes. I can go into a lot more detail on some things, but let me just open it up and see if you have questions.
Chris, I have a question. My name is Mandy Miller. I'm a Montrose, Colorado resident. I'm curious on what's being done for education and what's being labeled as climate change is actually lack of forest management, and how do you make that education gap to people to help bring to light on what proper forest management looks like and what's related to lack of forest management versus climate change.
So I want to be really clear that, for our parts, when we talk about the management of national forests and as it relates to climate and as it relates to fires, that the reason that our forests right now are burning the way they are is based on several factors. The first one is that we have been suppressing fires for 110 years. And so the number of trees that we have per acre, in many places, it would have been historically 60 to 80 trees per acre. Now we have over 300 per acre. And that's due to fire not thinning those forests. It's also due to us not going in and thinning those forests. And in order to not see the large scale fires that release massive amounts of carbon into the atmosphere and contribute to climate change, we know that we have to bring those forests back to the state where they can withstand fires. And that can be done through prescribed fire, through thinning, and through a number of other means. And just to be straight about that, we know when we do that, that those forests then contribute to mitigating climate change. We also know that climate right now, we have fire seasons that are nearly year round, and that we are experiencing in most places in the West, weeks to months longer, drier fire seasons than we've seen in the last 30 years. And that all contributes to where we are. So I hope, Mandy, that answered the question. You know, we're not shying away from the fact that active management is needed in these places, but we're trying to paint the complete picture of what's going on.
Thank you for that, Chris. My brother-in-law is a hotshot firefighter with the Forest Service, and has been for his entire adult career. So we have these conversations regularly. So thank you for that response. I saw Nancy's hand go up first, and then we'll go to Ziska.
Thanks.
Nancy?
I'd like to thank you, Chris, for being with us today. You have been a great leader for all those years you were working with the U.S. Forest Service, and now you've got even bigger challenges where you are right now. Part of what we talked about today, you talked about increasing the budget, and yet the Modernization Act and the U.S. Forest Service budget really locks Region 2 in an area of, it's probably a bigger challenge now than it's been in many, many years. I know that we were finding people, Forest of Faucets, our big water users on the Front Range, that would put up matching dollars. They couldn't even get enough matching dollars to use every dollar they had available. So it's a huge challenge, kind of making the shift that you talked about. I worry a little bit also, the budget's a huge thing right now, getting through this modernization, because we're kind of locked. We're one of all the regions in the United States, we are one of the lowest per FTE forests, the whole region. So we're locked in at a fairly low rate for as big as the challenges are right now. Secondarily, I worry a little bit about the executive order on 30 by 30, because it seems to be all of a sudden nobody's paying attention to the forest plan anymore. They're sitting there going, well, now what can we go conserve? And you're kind of going, the forest plans did a pretty good job of identifying acres that need to be conserved in future wilderness area. And it seems like we we work out of the GMUG, so we're in the middle of a revision. And it's like, but does it matter anymore? Because all of a sudden we get end run, or people come from the side with brand new initiatives. So that's another thing that derails this increase of pace and scale that you're talking about. So I read the transition document on the climate, and it fits with Western Colorado. But then I hear executive orders that don't feel like they fit with Western Colorado. So can you talk about some of those tensions and
Sure.
the budget thing? Because we're unique, I think, among the United States for where we're going to be under the modernization of the U.S. Forest Service budget.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. So I'm going to take each of those in pieces. I'll talk about budget modernization first. I'll talk then about 30 by 30 and the alignment, I think, between the Climate 21 and where we are right now. And then I'll hit on the importance of working through forest planning and how that relates to some of those end runs that you're speaking of. The budget modernization work that we are going through, we were told to do it by Congress. The objectives make sense. The way our budget was before was not that transparent in how we did our accounting, and we got called on it, and I get that. As we've moved into this first year of doing budget modernization, one, it's revealed some pretty significant issues that we're fixing and working on. But the other part is it's created a lot of ambiguity, uncertainty for our local forest units and especially our partners. They don't know how much money they have. They don't know if they can say yes to longstanding partnerships where they've been in the past and funding those. And it's created a lot of concerns. And they're right. We're really focused on fixing that. And the way that the chief has approached that has to bring together the national leadership team, all the regional foresters, all the national leadership team to just really get into the weeds of this and fix all these issues before we go into the next fiscal year. Some of it was process. Some of it was honestly just really coming to light the lack of resources that are in the agency, especially because last year, you know, we moved more folks in our fire organization to permanent firefighters, and that's a good thing. But then the costs of that, and I don't know if anyone saw the hearing today, but you know, the federal firefighters, we struggle with pay equities with state level folks at times, but if you look at the cost of transferring those over, boy, it just affected every other natural resource program. And you're seeing some of those effects this year. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we're not funding all the other program areas at a level that we need to, and that suddenly became really transparent, whether it's our partners or whether it's the employees. You know, you have forests and ranger districts that are operating at somewhere between 30 and 50% staffing from where they were just 10 years ago. We've made that message super loud and clear to Congress. There's choices here. If you want us to do this work, we're working hard to be as efficient as possible. But at the end of the day, it comes down to resources. And although we had roughly the same number of people, the amount of those people that are basically dedicated to fire is choking out our ability to do almost everything else, whether it's processing a permit, picking up garbage, or simply just, you know, going out and providing educational services. In terms of 30 by 30, the last report that just came out on 30 by 30, you're going to see that it really emphasizes the role of working lands, the role of respecting private property rights, really focused on voluntary contributions. And I think there was a lot of concerns about that. And from our standpoint, when we look at some of those things that contribute to 30 by 30, such as the Forest Legacy Program or the LWCF, we want those to be consistent with the broader planning efforts we've done through planning. And you're right. I mean, I've even testified on the Hill about this. You know, we'll have these great ideas that come up, but we tend to not always say yes because we're right in the middle of the big public process, working out and coming up with solutions that are compromises. And sometimes folks go straight to Congress or straight to some of these other resources. And that doesn't fit our planning model. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I am going to say that I want to respect the public process that we put in place to try to create compromise. And we're going to continue to advocate that in these roles as we go forward. And in the report that came out, I think about 3 weeks ago now, on 30 by 30, you'll see, and our influence of this through the Secretary of Agriculture was locally based solutions for accomplishing some of those broader goals. And that is, and the role of working lands and those sorts of things, that is part of us saying, hey, we have to respect, if you're going to create long-term ownership, fidelity to some of these decisions, you want them to come from a space of local residents and government supporting those outcomes. You don't want to force it down. I hope I answered your question, Nancy.
For the sake of time, let's move over. I saw Ziska and then Merritt. So Ziska, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there. I'll try and be brief. I grew up watching the sheep graze on Aspen Mountain. That worked really well. We don't do that anymore. And the other incident that, or program that springs to mind is the Cold Creek mine reclamation project, which I saw the spring after they'd done their very first attempt at it in 2014, right after the Forest Service had this massive sequester cut. And that also worked really well. Now, both of those included using either cattle stomp or the sheep grazing or some measure of agriculture that was going in to help restore the land. The biochar project is actually pretty close to an economic virtual circle in that you're using beetle kill and pyrolyzing it down in Pueblo and then bringing it back with compost on top of mining slag, which they saw fireweed coming back within one winter on slag that had been barren for 60 years or more. All of those things combine an ecological mandate with a commercial agriculture and agricultural one. And boy, I'd like to see more of that. And I don't know how we can get to that, going through all the hoops everybody's got to jump through. So where does that initiative start, and where do we as individual citizens put our voices behind it?
All right, so I really appreciate the question. There are these great solutions, I think. You know, we've seen really great outcomes of, let's say, goat grazing in California and shrubbery material. And I'm very familiar of, I'm not familiar on in your area around the sheep grazing, but I've definitely seen it in Nevada and places like that. In my mind, and the way that we've influenced the president's budget, and you'll see this, it's all tools on the table. There are issue right now. We cannot just choose a single path of how to get there. And so we are incentivizing and trying to fund multiple places where we do this. I think that one of the things that's really powerful is that working through, let's say, conservation districts or working through local planning efforts, that there is some power, I think, in those sorts of solutions where you're pulling together agencies like the Forest Service, NRCS, BLM, along with the conservation district to look at an entire area and say, how do we work and plan together before some sort of emergency comes? And what is the suite of things that we can do? And then I think it's about bringing in your neighbors to talk about that and advocate to that and create that local advocacy of where we're going. Those sorts of solutions, I think, have a lot more success in the long run. I think looking at the full cycle of just not saying, what should you do, but thinking about what we need to do and asking about how we can create incentives for that. One of the biggest challenges we have with reducing fire risk, and you just named one of them, is taking low value material, small diameter trees, and making something useful out of them and creating markets for them. Biochar has great applications for remediation on abandoned mine sites, things like that. We're going to focus on that this year. You'll see that actually on Friday when the president's budget drops, that there is a focus to start to do things like that. But there's also a need working with local governments to create, and I think with other federal agencies, to create ways to overcome capitalization for industry that's been lost. That's one of the greatest challenges. And we've got to sit down and actually have open conversations around that. Maybe it's about creating tax-free zones. Maybe it's about low interest loans that are coming through places like rural development. But getting the right folks together to talk about a whole solution rather than pointing at what people need to do in their spaces. But that's where I think the solution space is. I'm committed to helping create that sort of approach, Ziska. That's the way I think about it.
Thank you. And Merritt, you have our last question.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Chris. Those are very good comments. And I really want to kind of take off a little bit about what Ziska said, because I think that she's onto something there in terms of the financing for this whole thing. You know, we used to have a lot more grazing and a lot more logging, and those were actually things that contributed money to the Forest Service. And all we talk about now is the Forest Service doesn't have any money, so they can't administer these projects and all this. And we're not protecting our forests by saying, oh, there's not money for it. We have to figure out ways, I think, and you're on the right track about how to generate money from the forest as a revenue source, whatever that be, the small diameter trees or the ones that make boards or the grazing. And then I think the second thing that I think is the bigger picture thing is how do we make the culture change that needs to happen in terms of how we look at managing these forests. I think a lot of us here I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but I think there's a lot of people out there that still see the hands-off approach to managing our forests. And I think we're starting to see that that's not working. Even Senator Bennett has said it's not working. And how can Club 20, how can we help you to make that pitch to people that are in charge of these budgets to realize that we can manage these forests actively and save a ton of money, as you mentioned, by doing these proactive measures up front instead of spending millions and millions of dollars on the back end to fight these fires that have no economic benefit to
they don't.
Yeah.
And if anything, they create more long-term issues, whether that's in your water supplies, whether that's in soil movements that are occurring, you know. Anyway, I could go on.
Yeah.
You know, here's what I think, Merritt. As with probably our national politics at times, our public land management often gets put into these polarized corners. It's one or the other, but it's not. It is this matrix of things that we need to do. And I think a way that you could help and the way that we could help is to connect and bridge that. So those folks that are valuing wilderness areas and no management, I think owning and understanding that alongside the folks that are helping create forest products, and that knowing that a managed forest can have broad benefits to society, that bringing those two together and talking about how we make those complementary makes sense. I think it's too easy to go to simplified arguments to say the entire national forest has just become a giant saw log operation. That's not realistic. Right. It's not our politics right now. It's not realistic. But it is realistic that there are these common spaces. We're losing massive amounts of wildlife habitat. We're losing massive amounts of watershed quality. We're losing communities. We're putting smoke in the air because we are not bringing our forest to a space where they are healthy. And we created that, and we should own that. We should talk about that. It doesn't mean that we're going to go in there and just create a massive commercial logging operation. And it also means that we need to help incentivize the use of low value wood. You know, and there's high value in creating oriented strand board, let's say, for example. Ziska, you mentioned biochar. I think that's an emerging, a great opportunity, CLT. But I think we have to create these spaces and dialogues to not just let us retreat into the fights of the last 20, 40 years. Otherwise, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose these systems. And our communities that grew up in the shadows of those, and those of us that are asked to steward these on behalf of the country, we're going to lose our credibility. I just think that it is more important for us to bridge and own and have real conversations with the folks in Congress, with the folks in the states, with the various interested parties to say, it's not just these two arguments. It is this much more, it is a much more complex mosaic. And can we have some honest dialogue about what that looks like?
Chris, I'm going to ask you a question because Club 20 has set our priorities for the next 12 to 18 months to really focus in on forest management, watershed protection and restoration, and the nexus with agriculture. And I was just messaging with Nancy, who was in the timber industry for a number of years, and asked her, does anybody do a forest summit where we actually do exactly what you're talking about? We bring in well-known universities who've done research, and she said not that she really knew of. So I'm just thinking, why can't Club 20 try to hold a convening of that nature and really bring in subject matter experts to get fact-based information out into the world? And if we decided to do that, would you be willing to attend?
Oh, we'd be very willing partners. And I say that both from as being a career Forest Service employee, and I was a hotshot actually for a couple seasons. So I get what your brother is dealing with. But also to where I know both the last administration and then where the current administration is. No matter how you look at this, there are these pieces on either side, but the arguments are very similar. If you're going to focus on managing towards climate change, or if you're going to focus towards managing healthy forests through active management, those are the two sides of where things have been. There's actually massive common ground in the middle. We have to be real about what the situation is. Small diameter wood that is overstocking these stands, it doesn't, those of you in the timber business, they're not saw logs. We got to figure out what to do with those, whether it's energy generation or whether it's, going into some of these other products. And we should leverage saw logs where reasonable to help offset some of those costs. Like, it's an and conversation. And I think sitting down and convening and being able to say, here's our problem and here's how it affects our communities. And let's get into some honest dialogue about how we come together and create 360 solutions to this. That's the only way to do it. Because especially in places and the west side of Colorado has lost a lot of its infrastructure that would support a lot of this. You don't just build that back overnight. You're going to have to create a series of incentives and ways to achieve that to actually come to these goals. And that takes a lot of people and it takes some hard work, but a group like this can do that.
Yeah. And it's not partisan.
That's what I think. I mean, you might all be listening to me going, that guy's nuts, and you don't agree with me. And I get that. But this is what I think.
Definitely. No, I think I speak for the group when I think there's a certain level of excitement, and our organization is really motivated to try to convene our members behind an issue of mutual concern that doesn't play to the partisan division that we feel every single day. And this is that issue for us. This is our focal area for our financial resources, for our efforts, because it impacts every aspect of our lives, from tourism to water to our food production.
It does. Christian, I was on a discussion earlier today with a whole bunch of groups that, but they had invited in the two senior staffers from the Senate Ag Committee that oversees us on both the Republican and Democratic side. And you know what they both agreed on? They both agreed that, one, we have to address this problem, and you can't just lock up the forest to fix it. There has to be essentially both market and government solutions that are driving this. And it does mean that you're gonna have to go in and thin forests, whether that's through sheep, chainsaws, or fire. And being open about all of that and how to do it well and right, that protects the environment, that ensures that people have a place to go to recreate. I mean, that's what we're really talking about. So anyway, got me on a roll here.
I know, it's exciting.
Got way over time.
Well, on that vein, I do want to be respectful of Aster and Clint's time. So Chris, thank you so much for this. I think you've got us all excited. I will be in touch because I want to pursue developing a convening where we can have these conversations. So thank you.
You bet. And I hope Aster and Clint, I don't get these phone calls from you afterwards about what were you doing? Good to see you, Aster.
Good to see you as well. Good to see you as well, Chris.
So let me just take a quick second to introduce our last speakers of the day. And as I was kind of visiting with Aster during the networking break, as I've been Club 20, Aster has met with us in person every time we have asked him to. He also has flown out to Grand Junction and presented at our spring conference in 2016. So we cannot tell you how much we appreciate that partnership and collaboration enough, because it's a rare and unique thing that we really cherish. Aster Boozer is the regional conservationist for the West region, providing leadership on natural resource issues, and he also oversees conservation programs and technical assistance activities of the 13 Western states. And I'll let Aster introduce his guest, but Aster, I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us today.
Hey, well, thank you, Christian. Appreciate that. Thanks for the invite. And as you were saying, we have some, I say, good history of opportunities of visiting. And I think every time we've had a chance, the dialogue and conversation gets more in depth of what it is that we actually do on the landscape and how this agency, NRCS, plays a key role with other partner agencies, federal agencies, and other partners across the West region and nationwide. And so, thanks, guys. I appreciate your invite. And as Christian was saying, Clint Evans is our state conservationist in Colorado there, and Clint has his camera open, and I appreciate him joining as well. It's always good for the opportunity to have that local contact engaged, or and I told him I was going to name drop if he wasn't going to be able to make it. So it's always good for you guys to know who to reach out to there locally, and hopefully he's had a chance to meet a few of you guys. If not, he's meeting you now, and I'll talk about some things that the agency is doing when it comes to kind of a direction, some of our priorities, and I'm gonna cut mine to where Clint has a little time to talk a little bit about some of the things that he has going on within the state of Colorado. So we'll just kind of jump into this here, and I'll watch the clock, and we'll make sure we roll it out and stop right about that up at the 4 o'clock time frame for you, Christian. So guys, direction of NRCS. We're moving fast. Our overall mission is working with the private landowners. That's our main focus, is the private landscape. But when it comes to our mission, what we're doing is, one of the key things and direction we're moving on now is implementation of the Farm Bill. And that's what Congress puts out. That's where they have listened to the constituents on what's important within our overall realm of the type of work that we do. And that's what we're really focused on right now. To tie into that, I think it's some of the key points that partners have raised is the opportunities. And I know Chris mentioned some of the staffing issues. So I would say here early on in NRCS, we're in the process right now of bringing on some 1,500 new employees, albeit those employees will have to be trained, but that gets at more of having the staff that we need to do the work that's there on the land. So that's part of where we're going now, is getting conservation on the ground, implementing the Farm Bill, putting our staff in place to where we can actually continue to do that for our landowners across the country. A key thing that ties in with our direction, is another reason having Clint. We want to have a good focus on the local led process. We continue to strive to really push our state conservationists to push the local district conservationists and the partners there to have those local work groups, because that's where we get at the information of what is it that is needed in this community, in that little township, or whatever it might be. You know, I think Clint has that opportunity as he's working to bring some of those partners to the table when it comes to our state technical committee members in those meetings, where he's listening to leadership within other realms of the state that are bringing and can bring resources to the table. I think one thing that we have realized over the years is that we can't do it all by ourselves, but having an opportunity to partner with a group, organization that has a different skill set or has a different resource that they can bring to the table is where we can actually begin to be that much more successful. So we keep those points in mind. Clint does a great job with keeping his partners, leadership there in the state of Colorado engaged with what we have and what some of our needs are, but also he's listening for what is being said there on the landscape. So we appreciate that. Some of our priorities, you know, climate change is one that Chris mentioned, and what we look at from the NRCS perspective is climate smart ag. You know, we're on the landscape, we're working with our landowners, our partners out there. And so what are some of those climate smart agricultural practices that we are doing right now? And I think when you look at our suite of practices, our 170 plus practices, they all have that positive impact on the resources that we're addressing out there. But also it ties back more into some of the conversation we were having earlier, Christian, you know, water quality, water quantity, you know, drought, and what are some of those climate smart agriculture practices that we need to push maybe a little bit harder than we have before? You know, what are some of the things that are beneficial that we may not be doing? So we want to continue to do that. So drought is one of the key important priorities that we're looking at, you know, particularly here in the West. Drought and fires, I think they kind of go hand in hand to a respective part. You know, so we're continuing to work, you know, our states are reaching out to the partners, landowners within the state. You know, we have a wealth of practices that can actually help operations be more efficient, but it's not always that efficiency. Sometimes there's other things that we need to continue to work on when it comes to the overall drought issue and fire. You know, I'll just mention we have a couple of states in the region, Idaho and Wyoming, who are working on a cheatgrass challenge, where they're looking at ways of addressing cheatgrass to where we can reduce our fire risk by trying to manage and control it a little bit better. They're working in collaboration with the Western Governors Association. And I think, but just for you guys as reference, I'm sure you all know, NRCS has a partnership with the Western Governors Association, where we have a liaison that's housed there in Colorado there with Clint, Heidi Ramsey, who is working closely in hand with the Western Governors. So we get a full, I'll say, breadth of issues that the governors are talking about, some of the things that they're looking at, which ties in, and we try to measure and see where we can fit into some of those grooves that they are doing out there within the region as well and stuff. So here again, urban ag is another focus, you know, and it's not always, you know, downtown Denver that you look at urban ag. We also are looking at our tribes, and our tribes are within the region. It's a lot of times those communities. So we're looking at particular fashion of activities along with inclusion. And that inclusion is so important because the Farm Bill, the conservation programs that are at our disposal are for landowners, you know, and it's for all of our landowners. So, you know, I think from my perspective in the national office, we've been pushing our states to, you know, make sure that we're providing that opportunity for everyone to have access to our particular program. So that ties in with a lot of our overall priorities that we're working on, productive soils and our soil health initiatives as well. So I will wrap up quick here, Clinton, give you a few minutes and stuff. So I'll just talk about some ongoing efforts. And I know Clinton will pull from this one as well. Our Joint Chiefs, that's an overall forestry opportunity project that we worked on. Chris and the Forest Service and, our state foresters working with our state conservation. We have some great projects that we have worked together on to move some things forward. One other key point I want to just mention to you guys, and some of you may have been able to join, but back in December, we had the Western Waters listening session, and it was a move from then the Secretary of Ag for NRCS to listen to the landowners, and it was really across the West in the Colorado watershed, Colorado River watershed, the Ogallala aquifer area. So we were looking at 15 or so states when we in that particular realm of things. But so we listened, we provided some feedback, and long story short, we'll be coming back out to our state conservationists and giving them an overall cut of the information that we found out. But we're going to ask them to come back to our landowners, our local led folks, our state technical committee members, and really develop a strategy on what we need to do within our states to try to help address our water issues across the West as well. So I could go on, guys, but I wanted to give Clint a few minutes. And Clint, I may have cut you short, but if you don't mind, I'd appreciate giving you a chance just to talk a little bit about some things that you may have going on there in Colorado. So Clint, let me pass it to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Esther, and thanks for inviting me to participate this afternoon. Christian, really appreciate the opportunity. Esther mentioned our State Technical Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to say that, I put my contact information in the chat. Anybody that's interested in joining our State Technical Committee, just send me an email. We'll get you on the invite list. Our next meeting is scheduled for mid-July, around July 23rd, I think, is when the upcoming meeting is. So anybody that's interested, we'll get you on the invite. Would love to have you. As far as locally led conservation and thinking about y'all's interest in prioritizing, looking at forest stewardship and forest stewardship management across the state in Colorado, especially where it affects Western Colorado, I agree the locally led approach is definitely the best way to go. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Envision Chaffee County effort that Chaffee County has got underway. We're partnering with Envision Chaffee County, the U.S. Forest Service, State Forest Service, and other local partners through the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, and they're also putting in a Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP, project proposal to do fuels treatment on forest land. So y'all may be aware of the Decker Fire that occurred in 2018 there in the southern end of Chaffee County, affected Salida and some of that surrounding area. That really got the local community's attention and folks' interest in recognizing that proactive forest stewardship management is going to be not only important, but essential to protect the local economy there that's so dependent upon travel and tourism and folks coming into the community. So anyway, I would just highly recommend reaching out to Cindy Williams, or if you need me to help make an introduction, just reach out to me and I'd be glad to get you in touch with Commissioner Greg Felt and Cindy and others there to present to Club 20 in a future meeting to talk about that program, what they got going. I think it's a great example of something that could be replicated in other counties and other places across the state. The snowpack, we've been talking a little bit about climate change and water in the West. And as you may be aware, the 80% of our ag water in Colorado comes from snowpack and snowmelt. Some of you may have seen that some of the basins in north central Colorado ended up the year around 92 to 95% of normal snowpack. Well, that looks good on the surface. The stream flow forecast, though, is the more important number. So when you start looking at the stream flow forecast on our SNOTEL data, you'll see that it's only 50 to 55% of normal, even though we had 90 to 95% snowpack. There's other basins in south central and southwest Colorado that weren't quite so fortunate this year. They only ended up somewhere around 70% of the normal snowpack. So their stream flow forecast is even lower. So take a look at that data. If you got any questions about that, I can get you all in touch with Brian DeMoncos, our snow survey data collection officer. He and his team can help answer any questions y'all might have on the water supply forecast for 2021. But in a lot of counties, it could be a short water season because the snowpack was so low. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention a little bit about a new opportunity for water management entities across the state through our Environmental Quality Incentive Program. That's where irrigation districts and water users have an opportunity to sign up for EQIP. So typically that has just been an on-farm individual farmer, rancher, forest owner signing up. We now have funds set aside. We had a sign up. We'll be funding the fiscal year 21 contracts to do broader, larger scale irrigation improvement, irrigation delivery type projects. So there's a new opportunity there through our EQIP program to potentially get funding directly to irrigation districts or irrigation water management entities around the state. We'll have another sign up in FY22, and we'll be asking for additional funds going into fiscal year 22. So just wanted to mention that there's another opportunity there to help improve. You know, we've got some really historic irrigation delivery systems out there across the state that are in serious need of upgrades to reduce seepage, and especially in the west slope to help reduce salinity control or help with salinity control. If we can put those ditches either with a lining or potentially in a pressurized pipe, we can help reduce that salinity leaching out of those soils. So anyway, just wanted to mention a couple of those things. Really glad to be with y'all today, and it was good to see Chris Treese's name. I worked with Chris back when he was at the Colorado River District, so look forward to reconnecting with him as well. Thanks,
Chris, turn your camera on. While Chris is turning his camera on, I want to tell you, Clint, if a letter of support for some kind of funding or grant for a particular project would be beneficial, email me and we are glad to write it. We are, you know, because I know you guys are a little bit different as far as government agencies go, and have to fight for those resources probably a little bit more than some of the others. So if that would be impactful and meaningful, please reach out to me and let us know. We'd be so glad to write you guys a letter.
All right, really appreciate that, Christian. Thank you.
And Merritt, I know you have something to say because you don't put your camera on if you don't. But before,
thank you.
Before you do, Nancy and we've been chatting it up over here in the chat. And I want to make sure you guys are aware of a group that Club 20 is a co-founder of, which is called the Colorado Forest Watershed Alliance. And it's called COFWA. And it's modeled off of the California group that is of similar name. And we, Nancy and Chris Treese, and then Cindy Dozier, our former board chair, are our 3 representatives to this group and have been doing great work in this space. So Nancy, I'm going to ask you to talk about that just real quick, and then we'll go to Merritt.
I don't really want to take up too much of your time, but Chaffee County, we do follow that Envision Chaffee, the RMRI, the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative down Southwest Colorado. We have the Adaptive Management Group that's in Gunnison County, and one's GMUG wide for Speedmar. So we're getting more and more involved with things to do interface with NRCS. So we thank you. We actually sent a big letter saying you talked about what you're doing on implementing the Farm Bill, and we noticed in there is the Water Source Protection Act within that Farm Bill that said exactly what our emphasis is get up there in the watershed, sometimes above our reservoirs that feed our irrigation water. We said, you guys never funded it. You put it in the Farm Bill and you never appropriated dollars. So we've lobbied on behalf of things like that. We call it advocating. We really don't lobby. But we've been very active, and it occurs to me we really benefit having you at our next ag meeting, where as Christian mentioned, I think we're both on, this is our main emphasis for the next 18 months. And we have policy meetings when we bring in key speakers. We may do a summit, we do town halls, and we're trying to be the bridge that Chris French talked about. One of the things on 30 by 30, some of that is being discussed for the high country ranches, but some conservation easements don't allow working landscapes, meaning they don't want you to do oil and gas drilling and yada, yada. And they also don't allow logging in some conservation easements. And we believe in that working landscape approach that Chris French mentioned. So thank you both. COFA has met with NRCS in Denver. We want to make sure we never duplicate anything and want to be as supportive as we can. So thank you both, gentlemen. This has been a great presentation. And one of the last things, the Joint Chiefs projects that they're talking about in budgets. One of the areas what was above Silverjack Reservoir in Montrose County, Denison County National Forest. They go, well, we can't get money like that because it's a small project because we're so fragmented with public lands up at the higher elevation. So what I've seen is kind of a gap. We don't look that high as farmers very often. And that's one of those other areas that maybe we could all work on together to say, you're part of that watershed that we need that actually ends up in a faucet somewhere. So it may need mitigation. Because we can't afford to put mulch on every forest fire in the state of Colorado. It's much better if we get in there ahead of time. So thanks both of you. It's been a great presentation. Sorry, Merritt, take it away.
Okay, so I really don't have a whole lot, and actually I was going to tag on, and Christian actually beat me to it. I was going to offer help from Club 20 and whatever we can do and or I can do as the chair for the NRCS, and because I really appreciate the work that you guys do. And even specifically, I want to thank you for the work that NRCS is doing here to help us do this after the fire recovery for the East Troublesome fire, because there's a whole page full, a whole spreadsheet full of acronyms about all the groups that are taking part in this fire recovery, and NRCS is certainly part of that in terms of how we're doing some of this debris management and watershed mitigation and all these projects we're working on. So really appreciate the help of NRCS on that. And again, just want to offer any help that Club 20 could do to help you guys seek funding, letters of support, or whatever that looks like. And that's really all I have. Yeah, whatever it can do.
I'll come to DC, Aster.
Yeah.
I have friends I can crash on couches. My buddy Ian Lyle over at Water Resources, who's going to be speaking tomorrow, will let me crash on his couch. So,
and that sounds good. And Merritt and Nancy, both, we appreciate the positive feedback and comments. And Nancy, to your point, we have really engaged our source water people this year. Sylvia, Mom, and a half a dozen others we've engaged with. We had a session in the, I think we had 2 sessions in the West region where we pulled the partners together, source water folk, and have reached out. And I know Clint can testify to the fact that I've been pushing them on about making sure we're meeting, it's a requirement of that 10% that we make sure we get done. And they're doing the work, and I think this is it's a start for an opportunity where we have more of that engagement. And I think from the NRCS perspective, we're glad that we have this here opportunity, and it's really more of a focus for us to do this. So appreciate those comments, and Mary, definitely appreciate your support. And I know Clint appreciates having you guys there in the state, and you mentioned that the watershed, that firework we're doing, Clint and his team of folks. That engagement of getting involved, and we really have to talk ahead of time, and making sure that we know what's going on and what's the plan when we have a fire. It used to, I think it's getting to the point now that it's just a regular part of our business. We know we'll have fires, and we should know how we're going to address them after the fact. But what can we do early on? Because we have some areas that we should be doing more planning on how to address that to where we can reduce that overall impact of those hot fires and, manage and make them a little bit cooler and stuff like that. But so I'll stop. I could ramble on for a while.
Thank you, sir.
We both can get engaged in a good topic, and it's exciting. It's what we really love to do, and working with you guys. So thanks. Appreciate those. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you both. Aster, it's pushing dinner time in your neck of the woods. So We sure appreciate you hanging on for a few extra minutes. And Clint, we appreciate you joining us and look forward to partnering with you more closely. You know, one of the things that we've talked about at Club 20 is it's great to have these really exciting conversations, but then how do we take the conversation from this point and turn it into something actionable and meaningful that has an impact to our region? And so, you know, let's brainstorm that. Let's figure out how we can actually do something with this so that we can have an impact and mitigate some of these catastrophic fire events that we are seeing. So again, thank you both. We appreciate you so much, and we hope you guys have a wonderful evening.
Hey, thank you guys as well. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. Look forward to working with you.
Before we do move into our virtual networking time, I want to take just a quick moment to thank our sponsors who are so generous with their support of Club 20 events. Chevron is our title sponsor for this virtual Zoom Washington, D.C. fly-in, so we're so grateful to Carrie Baird and the team. Mark and Kathy Fackler, it was brought up a few times today just how incredible these two individuals have been. They've jumped right into Club 20 as new members and have been so supportive of all of our events. And then that digital briefing book that you were all emailed, the little flip book that I hope you enjoyed, was brought to you by Executive Security International and Rocky Mountain Health Plan. So thank you to those sponsors. Now, as we move into our Membership Plus Lounge networking time, if you are planning to stay with us, please grab a drink and a snack if you'd like to, and then come back in here. We'd love to have some virtual networking time if you are all interested in it, but if it's just me and the girls, that's okay too. So stay if you want, leave if you want, no pressure at all.